Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, we are back. Welcome to the unofficial official season 2 of the Prymal podcast. If you can't tell, I am buzzing. Quick recap, because it's been a while since the last episode. We've moved the Prymal studio to a brand new spot. This is the first episode of the podcast recorded from the new space, and it's class. You can check out the Instagram at Prymal Pro to get a good look at what we've done with the setup. We've also got a whole plethora of new podcasters and clients in with us, creating amazing content across a huge range of topics. And I have an absolutely whopper list of just pure animals coming in as guests on this show in the coming months. So strap in, because we've only just gotten started on where we're taking this. To kick things off, my guest today represents what this podcast is all about. He's a man with a mind as deep and complex as they come. He's a good friend of mine, and he's the other half of something we've called NEXOA, an ecosystem we're building that's going to take the field of human growth, performance and community to the next level. We'll explain more on this during the podcast, as well as diving into some really interesting topics like purpose, personal philosophies, the hierarchy of human needs, how to effectively replace bad habits with good habits that shape your life, and much, much more. I am delighted to be back recording the podcast and to welcome the first guest of this new phase, my friend, my partner in crime, Mr. Darren Hendrick. Enjoy the show. Welcome to our shared journey to find the answers to questions about health, wellness, nutrition, performance, life and success, and to craft the most resilient, hardy and happy humans you've ever seen. Welcome to the Prymal podcast. Mr. Darren Hendrick, welcome to the Prymal podcast.
Danny, it's good to be here. Great to be here.
It's great to be here. And we've a few firsts now, because this is the first podcast in a while, because I took a bit of a sabbatical from the Prymal podcast. So welcome to unofficially season 2.
Great.
It's my first podcast in the brand new studio, which people, by the time this goes out, will have actually seen the studio. I haven't put the video out yet, but people will see the studio. People are banging my head looking for this video.
I'm honoured.
And it's our first podcast together, which I'm kind of envisioning is going to be the first of many, many podcasts,
yes.
And people will understand that by the time we finish. But I'll just give a little bit of context first to why you're here from my point of view, and then I'm going to let you take over, because I know we've lots to talk about today. But we only met 18 months to 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Through a mutual friend, shout out to Downey Keane.
Yeah.
And
the
immediately...
Key Machine.
The Key Machine, yeah, the mean Key Machine. And immediately I knew this was going to be way, way bigger than a glass of whiskey on a Friday evening in the studio. We connected on several different levels.
Straight away, we spoke for 5 hours, didn't we? Non-stop.
Non-stop, yeah. We should have actually recorded that as the first podcast. But over the last, I suppose, 18 months, it's led us to this moment, which is, as I said, the first of many. But what we're essentially going to talk about today is all of the stuff condensed down into hopefully under 2 hours that we spoke about over the last couple of years, and the plans and projects that we have. But why I'm really interested in having a conversation with you on mic, as opposed to just another chat between Dan and Derek, Dan and Darren, is I'd like you to start sharing some of this absolute wisdom that you have when it comes to things like habit formation, normalization of people's lives, which we'll explain in a minute, achieving real purpose, contentment, freedom, and all those things. Because in the last 18 months, I've learned a huge amount about how to implement all of this knowledge that I do have and I'm aware of, and we share a lot of that knowledge, but I've been brutal at implementing, and you've been a massive part of helping me understand how to implement that stuff. As I know from watching it in the communities that you're building and the groups you're running, you've helped most of your peers and friends, and I know you're very modest about that. But just to give us a bit of background,
appreciate that.
You're very welcome. Just to give us a bit of background on yourself and kind of your journey to this point where you seem to have such a grasp on how the society is developing at the moment, and where you see your place in helping people kind of understand themselves a little bit more. Maybe give us a bit of background on yourself and how you got to that point yourself, because it's a very interesting journey.
Yeah, and listen, first of all, I just want to acknowledge that I'm very humbled with them comments, but also as much as I've researched these topics, I still, there's so much I don't know. And there's a big difference between understanding and execution, as you know. So in hindsight, looking back, I suppose, I just found myself with a lot of weight on me, in a pretty bad place physically and mentally. Never very athletic, wasn't very productive, and I had a very intense moment with myself where I basically gave myself a stern word, you know, and told myself that if I can't change myself physically, if I can't get control over my physical health, then I'm never going to succeed at anything. You know, how can I succeed at anything if I can't get control over this one thing in my life? So that set me on a trajectory of fitness and health, and ultimately I became consumed and obsessed with just growth and improvement and information around these topics, which led me down many, many different rabbit holes to where I am at the moment. You know, and looking back in hindsight, I realised that it was how I initially started that fitness journey that made all the difference. You know, taking it slow, starting really small, just going out on one cycle a week. First cycle was 1.5 kilometers. I came back, I could barely breathe. I was in the kitchen trying to talk to my mom, gasping for air. So, you know, so that was kind of the start of it. And given what I know now about habit formation, that was the best way to approach it. Start small, make it so easy that it's kind of difficult to say no to, and focus on implementation and integration as opposed to quick, dramatic change.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
It does answer my question, yeah. And again, why I said I'd like to speak to you is because that's a part that most people struggle with. And I don't know how you figured that out at such an early age. But what I find a lot of people struggle with nowadays is the implementation of, like, everyone knows that they should eat more vegetables and exercise more, and now do some breathing exercises and journal and meditate and all this kind of stuff. But actually doing those things is a completely different battle. So how did you know that you had to, like, well, I'm going to ask you about habit formation in a minute, because you're very, very well versed on the science of habit formation. But at that age, when you were just starting out and you were in this pit of despair and you weren't in good physical condition, how did you know what to do?
Yeah, it's a great question. I had tried to go to the gym a couple of times before as a teenager, and failed. I went to the gym, had a program, tried to go, you know, multiple times a week, and quickly, you know, failed. It wasn't sustainable. It was too dramatic.
When you say failed, what do you mean by failed?
Like, you know, you'd go to the gym, you'd have high motivation, you'd like have the best intentions, and you'd be sure that, oh, this is it. I'm going to change myself, I'm going to get fit, and you'd have all these visions of how you're going to look, and, you know, the abs and the muscles and everything. That I think many of us share, them ambitions. New Year's resolutions would suggest so.
Yeah.
And I kind of had many setbacks, and ultimately when I was in that kind of place and I decided to, you know, really commit to it, I remember stepping back and not thinking about the immediate results I wanted, but where did I want to be in 4 years? How did I want to look in 4 years? And acknowledging that I didn't care how long it took and how slow I had to be, but this is about the big picture. This is about a long, significant change of lifestyle. And for whatever reason, I think maybe just off my own personal experience, knowing that when I tried to change it too dramatically in the past, it wasn't sustainable. I'm not sure exactly how I arrived at the conclusion, but I decided that starting small and just going out once a week on the bike, that's what I committed to first, was my best chance at creating sustainable change. And the same went with diet. I didn't change my diet dramatically. I just decided to take 1 or 2 things out per week. So I slowly just started taking bad food out of my diet, you know, bits of sugar, some sweets, chocolate, which ultimately led to the point where I didn't eat sugar or carbohydrates for over 6 months, and I didn't drink fizzy drinks for a year. You know, that's ultimately where it led, but that's not how it looked at the start.
Yeah.
You know, it looked at maybe I'll have 3 cans of Coke instead of 5 cans of Coke, and then I'll have 2 cans of Coke, and then I'll have Coke Zero, and then, you know, just slowly and gradually making the change. So
yeah, it's what you're saying there. I mean, you're going to give us some of the science now behind it in a few minutes, but over the last couple of years, it's a concept I've been exploring with a few people, and a few people have been on the podcast and spoken about this. And I haven't actually read this book either, The Myth of Motivation, but this idea that you have to be super motivated to make major change in your life. and that'll get you there. It's just about the motivation and the energy and go has been, for me anyway, it's been kind of dispelled over the last couple of years from talking to several different people who work in industries where they help people actually achieve goals like fitness or weight loss or improved health or fertility or whatever it is. And it all sounds exactly like what you've described there. It's not a massive unsustainable change like a New Year's resolution change where you have to generate this massive amount of drive and energy, because ultimately that's unsustainable. Try and sprint at 100 meter pace for a marathon, you can't do that. And that concept everyone has heard before, but when you actually start to implement that, this myth of you have to be super motivated goes away, and what actually comes down to is you have to be disciplined and have a plan. And you went from 5 Cokes to 3 Cokes, whereas most people say just stop drinking Coke.
Yeah,
like that's
difficult. That's what we see time and time again every year. You know, in the 1st of January.
Yeah,
I would assume, and I think you'd agree, that the majority of people have big ambitions to create change in their life. And usually what happens is people splurge over Christmas, and then they come out of Christmas into the new year. It's a fresh beginning. And, you know, there's a lot of power to that psychological turning of a year and a fresh year. It's like a blank slate. And motivation is through the roof. It's why we see all the fresh gym memberships in January. Everybody wants change. Everybody has this desire. And in January, the motivation is through the roof. It's so high and everyone is ready and energized to create this change. And they create such dramatic change in their life. And then the weeks pass, and as motivation does, it wanes, it drops because it's not sustainable. And when that drops, the demand of change that they've put on their system is just so dramatic that the body can't cope with it. So it defaults, you know, naturally. It defaults back to the kind of automatic ingrained behaviors that had been running your system up until that point. And you identify that as you being a failure. And that's the kind of notion that you identify with toward yourself. I can't do this. I can't accomplish this. I'm a failure. And that kind of can turn into negative talk. But ultimately, what it is just a lack of understanding over behavior change and effective behavior change. And yeah, just putting way too much of a demand on the system. You know, so I see it as a design problem.
That's interesting.
You know?
Yeah. You said something very, very, very interesting to me there. And it's something that I do believe. Everybody wants change.
Yes.
You believe that?
I do. I think most people. I think there is some people out there that are very content with who they are, very happy with who they are, and, you know, maybe don't have such ambitions to change their physical selves, and maybe they just are very happy and content, and that's amazing. And if you're in that place, you know, well done, because that's ultimately what's important. It's about being content in oneself and being happy. But I firmly believe that most people, they want to grow, they want to change, they want to be able to be healthy, they want to be able to sing, they want to be able to, you know, be in good shape, and they want to be creative. And, you know, everybody is attracted to these skills and outlets. So, yeah, would you agree?
Absolutely, I would agree. And it's something I say regularly, and maybe I don't communicate it properly when I say it, because sometimes I get a lot of pushback when I say I genuinely believe, especially nowadays, because I can't speak for 50 years ago, because I wasn't alive 50 years ago, people seem to not be as happy as they could be. And I'm not saying should be or anything like that. I'm not saying there's a level you have to get to. But in my experience, from my professional experience working in an environment where we help people who weren't happy, my personal experience with my friends and family and people that I know, I get a really strong feeling that people want to be happier or could be happier. There's definitely a lot of room for improvement. I include myself in that, definitely. But sometimes you get a lot of pushback from people say, we're not all miserable, it's the best time to be alive, things are grand, it's fine. And
which is true.
It's a great time to be alive. Yeah. And yeah, obviously life in one way is much more comfortable for us.
But it's a paradox, isn't it?
It's definitely a paradox.
You know, because the paradox is that on one side you acknowledge that we probably live in the best time to be alive, and life is good, and we're very fortunate, and we're very lucky to live in the kind of environment that we do, and have food on our table and health and
turn the tap and water comes out.
Yeah, we're very fortunate to have the privileges that we have, especially in Ireland, you know, in the Western world.
100%.
But that means, like, you know, that doesn't mean that it's not okay to be satisfied with oneself. You know, you can still have discontent towards where you are in life and what you're doing and how you're conducting your day and how you're spending your attention and time.
Yeah.
They can both exist at the same time, and I think they do.
Absolutely, yeah. A comparison I use maybe is a little bit basic, but let's go to 50 years ago from what we've been told, because I wasn't alive, but let's go to what we know about the time, where if it was physically a much more demanding time. You had to work in different ways, much harder, longer hours, food wasn't as readily available, things were physically more difficult. However, people were a little bit more ingrained in their purpose. They knew what their purpose was. It was survival, it was work the fields, it was work the mines, or a factory or whatever it was, and you went and it was hard and it was long, but there wasn't as much emotional distress and discomfort, I think.
Well, that's Maslow's hierarchy of needs, isn't it?
Absolutely.
People are operating on the level that what was most important was survival.
Yeah.
And by operating on that level where they're just trying to get by, they haven't got the freedom to consider how they want to spend their time and what kind of growth do they want, because it just wasn't an option.
Yeah.
You know, and I seen this in Southeast Asia when I was traveling there for, you know, over 4 years. I went to some of the poorest countries such as Cambodia. And interestingly enough, I went there expecting to feel sympathy. And in fact, I felt envious in many ways, because these people had nothing. But yet they had a contentness and a happiness and a social connection with each other that I just did not see in Ireland and do not see in many ways. So to me, it was very strange to realise that, God, I wish I had that. Even though they had nothing. They're living in a wooden house that has one room and you can see through the walls, and they're farming to get their next meal. But they have something that we don't in many ways. Yeah. It's interesting.
It's fascinating. And you're the second person to say that on this podcast. Stephen Considine was on. I'm not sure if you heard Stephen. And he spoke about this travelling experience. He expected sympathy, and it was actually envy that he felt. And I've experienced this as well. Dylan Fish is sitting in the studio here with us today doing the I'm going to wave at Dylan.
Yeah.
He's helping us out with the tech stuff today. He explained it to me as well. He travelled, it broadened his mind. He learned so much more about himself and the way we live here. It's very, very common, almost cliched for people to say that I went away and I found myself. But when you see that, maybe that is the 50 years ago in Ireland.
Yeah.
Like you see a level, well, maybe 50 years ago, maybe 100 years ago, but you see people who have more fundamental struggles,
course,
that they're overcoming and tackling on a daily basis.
Yeah.
But in general, they tend to be more content.
Yes.
They're not better off. They don't have more money. They have a nice studio and cars and food at their fingertips. But they seem a little bit more content with themselves, as opposed to us or the people that I commented on and I mentioned on.
We have too many options.
Too many options, and it creates a different problem for us.
Creates paralysis.
Paralysis, 100%,
in many ways. And you said something there about travelling. Yeah, there's this massive misconception that I felt. I don't know how it's changed because I've been away, but people think that, you know, you go to travel to find yourself.
Yeah.
You know, we're always discovering ourselves.
Yeah.
And when you travel to new lands, ultimately what you're experiencing is fresh environments, fresh stimuli, fresh input, fresh reference points, and new environments and new frameworks of thinking from a collective cultural level. So you step out of Dublin and you step out of Ireland and you expose yourself to these completely different society norms and the way people behave, and you kind of realize that, wow, like Ireland's a serious bubble, and they also have their own conditioning, and they also have cultural conditioning and certain ways of thinking, and every place has this. So that's another beautiful thing about traveling, is you get exposure to so many different environments and people that you can kind of come to the awareness that, you know, people are conditioned by their society.
Yeah.
But yeah, so to me, traveling is about growth and exposure to this massive world that we live in.
Yeah.
You know, not just this little tiny island that we are on, which is Ireland.
Yeah. Okay, so we agree anyway that we think people want to be happier, that they could be happier or more content, in our world anyway. What are some of the things you see about our world that are getting in the way of that? What are some of the pressures that we feel, or some of the issues?
You know, Laurie Santos is the
Happiness Lab.
The Happiness Lab.
You actually put me onto that.
Amazing podcast. If you're looking for a podcast, it's Laurie Santos is she's a professor of psychology at Yale, and she specifically studies happiness. So she has a course at Yale that she conducted, and it was the most popular course. So then she turned it into an online course on Coursera and other platforms. and it blew up there. And then she started this podcast. So she researches happiness specifically, you know, from a scientific perspective. And one of the topics I heard her discuss was about personal philosophy. So they did a survey or conducted some research from like the 50s, I think. And the majority of people had a personal philosophy. And then they conducted a similar survey recently. And the minority of people had a personal philosophy.
Just break down a personal philosophy for anyone who hasn't heard of this concept before.
I suppose in Irish society, you can say that historically, the personal philosophy has been derived from our belief in religion.
Yeah.
You know, that gives you kind of morals and principles to live by. So it's a framework of managing yourself. You know, treat thy neighbor. Be honest. Different characteristics that make up one person's kind of identity. So we would have been given them by the church, which are all beautiful ways to live in many ways. But as you know, recently the kind of relationship from a cultural level with the church has diminished massively. We find ourselves in a society where we haven't really got a belief system to orientate ourselves around. So to me, like a personal philosophy can be something like Stoicism, you know, which is one that I use, which is a kind of philosophy that the ancient Stoics would use. So a lot of the great philosophers like Seneca and Marcus Aurelius being maybe the most famous one. He was a famous Roman emperor, and he conducted his life around these principles. You know, it's a philosophy, it's a way of being, and it's pretty kind of in-depth and intricate, and there's many books and content out there on it, but ultimately it's a way of being. You know, it's how you what you stand by, and the way you want to live your life, and it's making decisions. And I think them decisions or philosophy create a framework, an internal framework for you to adhere to, and it just helps you or helps one navigate the stormy seas that we all experience a little bit more efficiently and smoother. So I think that's a massive consideration that, you know, should be given attention when we think about happiness in current society.
Beautiful. I couldn't have put it better, literally couldn't have put it better myself. And this was the concept when I started this podcast and this whole journey of self-discovery. My whole goal, as I said, was very selfish. It was trying to build, I called it my toolbox. Yeah. I didn't have a toolbox. So when stuff went wrong, I had some things I did that I'd learned over the years, but I didn't necessarily have a set of guidelines for myself that I followed, no matter whether it was a good thing or a bad thing I was dealing with. And it was essentially a personal philosophy that I was thinking about. I didn't have the words for that at the time. It was my toolbox I was talking about. And the mission for me was to bring as many people into this room, onto this podcast, into my community as possible, to learn about the different ways or the different things that I could do to add my personal philosophy. Yeah. And I used to say this a lot, and you've put it very well there. I'm not a religious person, but I think since we've kind of gotten rid of religion, I suppose, in this country, especially with our age group and younger, we didn't replace it with anything. No. So we didn't have a set of rules and guidelines, and we almost wanted to ignore the rules that religion gave us. We tried to baby out
because of the baggage.
Because of the baggage.
But there's a lot of beauty in what a religion communicates.
I won't say every, because I don't know every religion, but most religions are built on
there's a correlation there. Yeah,
there's a correlation. There's a fundamental set of principles that we follow. Be good to other people. Have a set of rules for yourself, and understand how you're going to interact with the community. Is essentially what religion is.
Yes.
And just too much baggage.
Yeah, a lot of baggage. And, you know, just to note that even before my exposure to Stoicism and other forms of kind of developed philosophies, you know, I wasn't the most religious later on in my teenagers and my 20s. I was quite a bit actually as a teenager in my own way. But, you know, one thing that I did do is I made deliberate decisions about how I wanted to treat people, how I wanted people to treat me, and what I stood for, my morals, my principles. And I, you know, was very deliberate about them, and I wrote them down, and I reflected on them, and I meditated on them, and I thought about them a lot. And, you know, in hindsight, that created a framework. It created a personal philosophy. You know, so it doesn't necessarily have to be a school of thinking that you prescribe to. It can be just your own framework that you establish yourself.
Yeah, yeah. And I think this is one of the parts where we give people some real practical advice here, because most people would be maybe familiar with this concept.
Yeah.
most people, in my experience, haven't actually got this down, and I'm including myself in that as well. They haven't got a personal philosophy. When I met you, it was overwhelmingly clear that you had a much more, now I'm not saying it's finished, but a much more developed idea and concept.
It's never finished.
It's never finished.
No.
But you had a much more developed concept of your personal philosophy, and you tried many, many things over the years, but you wrote them down. You thought about them, you considered them. I often bring up this quote. Oh, Jesus Christ. You know, I always forget this quote, but it's about sitting by yourself quietly. Most of man's problems stem from his inability to sit for 5 minutes by himself.
Powerful quote.
Very powerful quote. And the more you actually sit and think about that, you realise that's true, because unless you think about these philosophies or these rules, or if Darren Hendrick gives me a piece of information or advice, it's very easy for that to sit on the surface. If you sit and ruminate and absorb that and think about it and apply it in your own head to your own life, it becomes a lot more real, and then you can implement it. And then you keep writing about it and you keep trying to implement that thing. I'm on this kind of journey personally myself at the moment, and I struggle with this. It's a grind for me, but I'm writing about the things that I say I want to do because I've heard it from you or from somebody else, and I write it down and I look at it and I think about it, rather than just saying, now I know that information and pass it on to other people and think I'm a great lad and everyone thinks, geez, Dan has loads of info. Now I have to write it down, look at it, think about it, apply it to myself, and sit for a few minutes without turning on my phone or distracting myself, and I feel really uncomfortable. I'm like, why do I feel uncomfortable? Because I've said I want to do this. I'm not doing any of it.
You're not adhering to your own
I'm not adhering.
decisions.
And that's scary. And then you go, right, and you write it down again, and 4 or 5 days in a row, you're like, you didn't do it again today. It could be something really simple. Didn't do it again today. And then eventually realise, why am I not? And you figure out why you're not, and then you implement it. And it's something small.
It's self-accountability.
Very important, self-accountability.
And there's a couple of things that you touched on there, and the first that comes to mind is, actually creating space to be alone with your own mind, to actually consider and process.
It's terrifying.
It's intimidating.
It's intimidating.
Surprisingly, many people don't actually find comfort and will shy away from spending time with themselves. And I fall guilty to that as well. This is not a smooth journey. It's ebbs and flows. And as much as I write and I try to make these decisions and I try to live by my own standards, there's days and weeks where you just don't care. You just, like, life takes over and you're just you become unmotivated, and it can be very challenging to stay on top of yourself, and you kind of lose the run of yourself and you fall off the wagon, if you will, and then you have to get yourself back in that wagon. You have to get it going again, and you can't get it going at the same speed that it was going. You have to build the momentum again slowly. But I think ultimately, when you have this as a baseline that you orientate yourself around throughout time, you always come back to this. So you might slip and you might go astray, but because you've ingrained this solid base foundation, you come back to it. And I know from discussing this with some of my close friends who are on a similar wavelength, they would agree. This is not a smooth journey. And with the kind of finding peace and getting time to yourself, we live in a society now where we have unlimited distractions. And there's some really interesting research around the negative impacts of not creating space for yourself. The mind needs space to consolidate information, and it needs space to actually process. It's very, very important. And it's something that we all should be doing. Because otherwise, what are we doing? We're just reacting to everything. We're just reacting to stimuli, and we're not really taking control over our responsibility for our life. We're just a big reactionary machine that is reacting to stimuli. Naval Ravikant.
Oh, I know Naval.
Naval Ravikant is a person. He's a Persing intellect, and he's a venture capitalist, really prominent figure in San Francisco or the tech scene. And he has this saying, and he's like, I'm just this thing in this environment reacting to the stimuli according to my conditioning, which we kind of all are, on a very kind of deep, intricate level. But I think the bit of control we have, space to consider and process is very important to, taking that control.
Definitely. Yeah. Which circles us nicely back around to this initial topic of habit that I asked you about at the start. when you have this inevitable reactionary period and you fall back into the madness and the chaos of life, that is inevitable. It's inevitable. And I spoke about this before.
It is. It's a part of the code.
It is part of the code. It is written in.
It
and like,
is.
think about the most basic forms of that. You're going to have good days and bad days. If you're a female, you're going to have a couple of days every month that you know are going to be bad. You know, everybody knows days or minutes and hours are going to come that are going to be difficult, and it's going to be hard for you to do the things that you said you could do.
Yeah, and like, you know, women have that time of the month every month, and that's very real for them. But I think guys also have that. It's just not visually maybe experienced.
Absolutely, 100%.
You know, like there's nothing that we can latch on to be like, oh, this is our time of the month. You know, but we go through emotional change. We have hormones.
1,000%.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know,
and what saves you from that is having good habits. It's not motivation, because you won't have motivation on those days. It's not discipline, because you're not going to have discipline on those days.
No.
It's having a pattern that you've built, and we'll talk about, you can actually hotwire this entire system. It is a system, but a pattern that you've built for yourself that sometimes you won't follow, but most of the time you'll follow it. And even if it doesn't feel good immediately then and there, and doesn't immediately gratify you, it's a series of things that's linked to your personal philosophy and the things that you do every day and every minute and every hour that are going to help ground you when everything is madness.
Yeah.
Or even if you go on a 2 or 3 or 4 week mad one, I don't just mean a bender, I just mean in terms of emotionally, you'll always have that platform to come back to.
Yeah.
But if you don't have that platform,
of course,
you become this reactionary thing constantly.
Yes.
Forever and ever.
Yes.
And that is your habit.
That is your habit.
And that's where bad habits come from.
The way I think about it, it's like building a house. You build a solid foundation and you add brick by brick, and you're working. But then you get carried away. Maybe it's on holidays, maybe it's you know, how you're feeling, and you just kind of you kind of head off. You leave the foundation of the house unfinished, and it could be a week, it could be a day, it could be a month. But then, you know, you come around and you come back to the house and you start adding more bricks on, and that kind of pattern continues. And ultimately, what you're doing is you're building a solid house that probably will always go unfinished. But when you do lose the run of yourself, the house is still there. You can return to it. And it gets a bit stronger and a bit bigger each time you come back and you add more bricks.
And just a little caveat, because I love that analogy, but a little caveat I want to add to that is it doesn't matter when you start building that foundation. What does matter is acknowledging that you don't have it yet.
Yeah.
So if you're 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 or 60, it literally doesn't matter. People think, oh, geez, I haven't set me foundation. It's too late for me now. The most important part I feel about this process is recognizing, which is where it is, sitting by yourself and thinking about it actually. It's recognizing that you don't have that foundation yet, so that it's always going to be chaos, and that you're going to have to build that foundation before anything else starts to actually happen for you. Now, you might be super successful in your job and all that kind of stuff. It's not what I'm talking about. It's your personal philosophy.
Yes.
If you recognize, actually, I don't have anything that saves me when the madness comes, or anything I can revert back to, that's time to start considering building a foundation. And
also recognizing that, you know, we're not special in many ways. Like, we are all very unique, but we're all very similar. We all have a similar mind, functions in similar ways. We all have a similar brain. And we know from the science that the brain is plastic throughout life. We have this misconception that children are most susceptible to change, which is true. You know, they have that critical kind of mind and they're like sponges. And as you get older, you know, your brain becomes a bit more rigid, but we can always tap into that plasticity and change our brains in a real physiological way. And you understand this as well.
I do, and I want you to explain it for anyone who may not have heard these concepts before.
I suppose plasticity in the brain is just it's entering in a state where the brain is malleable, and you can influence it in a real way on a physical level. So imagine like you have certain pathways in your brain that are responsible for habits or conditions or behavior. If you tap into this, you can have a real influence on and change your brain on a physical level, which results in you changing, you know, and how you express yourself. And that can apply to many different domains. It can be personality, it can be your behavior. Same with skills, you know, when you learn the guitar or you learn an instrument or you learn any skill, what's happening there on a physiological level is there's an area of your brain that develops a mapping area that's responsible for that said skill. And then as you kind of expose yourself with deliberate practice and continue to try to get better, that mapping area gets thicker. So the way I like to describe it is initially you're like cutting down the trees in a forest and you're putting down a little gravel path, and that's kind of hard to walk and you might trip over it. But the more you walk it, the more you do the scale, play the guitar deliberately. The path gets a bit clearer, gets a bit smoother, and then it turns into a road, and then that road turns into a motorway. And that motorway basically means that the electrical signals that are being sent through the brain are hyper responsive and are very fluid. And that's when you get to the level where you are comfortable playing the guitar or whatever the skill is. And that's just a process that happens in the brain that everybody shares and everybody can tap into. And when you know that, it's very hard to say to yourself, well, I just can't do it because it's not me and I'm not able.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what a lot of us default back to.
It's a comfort blanket.
It's a comfort blanket, you know, and it's also hinged on all the previous failed attempts, say for like New Year's resolution, or all the times you wanted to and tried and failed. That's a part of your identity now, and you're like, I can't do that. It's not me. But that's not right, you know, because we know that we all share a similar brain. Within reason, of course, there's exceptions to that, but as a rule of thumb. So given that understanding, you can change, you know, if you really want to, and you just have some effort and understanding.
I think that's where people struggle with that last bit you said, that if you really want to, because we've established we think most people want to.
Yes, true.
And you've already covered it there, but just to clarify what you said as well, because I always say this, there's some people who are in genuinely difficult situations where maybe they don't have access to the resources that we would have access to. But
and it's hard.
It's not easy. It's very hard.
It's difficult.
Even if you are the most privileged, time-free person in the world, it's very hard to elicit change.
It is.
But it's possible.
It is.
And it's backed by science. And forgive the pun because maybe it's not that appropriate given the recent HSE issue, but you can hack the system. You can hack. If you understand how your brain works, you don't have to be. Now, again, no one. I fall victim to this all the time. No one is outside this. We all have emotions. We feel those emotions, and we should. But if you understand how your brain works, you can actually bypass that emotional loop and just do the things that you believe or trust or hear Darren Hendrick talk about that will create that foundation for you, no matter how you feel.
Exactly, and that's why I say I treat it as a design problem, because by me looking at it with that perspective, what I do is I step back and look at it objectively.
You come out of it.
Yeah, it's just something like, you know, this is I need to understand this better, and I take my identity and emotions away from it. I don't become this person that, oh, I'm this and I'm that. And listen, I do fall into that. I fall into that trap. You know, the mind, the mind is very persuasive and can come in and suck you under very quickly. But
you have a default.
I have a default, yeah, exactly. And we all do. But ultimately, I know that, you know, this is just a design problem. I just need to understand this. I need to execute it, you know, better in accordance with the literature, the science that's available.
Yeah. So give us some of your habits, some of your foundational habits, just to give people an example of what we're talking about here.
Yeah. So, you know, they've kind of changed throughout the years, but I suppose one of the most prominent ones is my morning routine. That's been very consistent, and what I do in my morning routine has kind of changed, but I view it as an opportunity to prime my mind. So when I wake up. So the latest one, I'd wake up and I'd kind of do some jumping jacks, I'd do some push-ups just to get the body awakened, because, you know, I've been lying asleep for 8 hours or more or whatever less. So that's the position my body has been in for a prolonged period of time. So I think it's important to wake it up. I'd have a pint of water because water is good for the system, and water is really important to optimizing our performance, if you will. And then I would journal. For a little bit, I'd write, maybe plan my day, or I would reflect on what I set out the night before. I'd read, I'd do some exercise, mobility, 10-15 minutes of mobility. And generally, I'll try to do these in a very specific sequence. So like wake up, jumping jacks, pint of water, writing, reading, mobility. I think mobility is ahead of the kind of other two. And that reason being is that you make it automatic then. You know, if you wake up at a similar time every day and you do the exact same routine, what happens after a while is it just becomes automatic. Initially, it's quite demanding on the system. And even when I did that initially, I didn't try to condense all them in. So I woke up in the morning and say I'd done 5 jumping jacks. And then I'd done a couple of push-ups. And then I'd meditate for 2 minutes. and especially if I fall off the wagon and I'm trying to get myself back on. Like there's been times where I've stopped meditating and found it impossible to, sit down and commit to the time that I did previously. So I might start out with 30 seconds or a minute and go down and just make it as easy as possible. Super simple, but with the intention of I'm just integrating here. I'm just getting myself used to performing these actions, knowing that very quickly in the coming weeks, this is really going to scale up. And as I scale up, it's not going to be as demanding on my body. I'm making it much easier for my system to adapt to the changes that I'm trying to integrate. So that's kind of something that's been very prominent in my life for a long time.
Yeah.
If that gives you insight.
It does, yeah. And the biggest thing I'm taking away from that is make it easy.
Yes.
Make it achievable.
Really important.
Yeah. It's not I mentioned this before, but it's not the Goggins model of you have to do something so difficult and horrible and flog yourself. That's a different process.
It is.
Recreating habit has to be achievable, has to be repeatable, and it has to be easy. And in most cases, it has to be somewhat enjoyable, or else you're not going to do it. If it's not enjoyable, if it's not easy, if it's not repeatable, if it's not achievable, you're not going to do it.
Yes.
And people know this, but still, it's the January 1st mentality. Okay, I'm getting all this motivation. I've been working this up for ages. I'm going to start next week, and when I start, I'm going to hammer it out of the park. That is definitely not sustainable.
High spikes of motivation can be delusional.
Yeah.
Because you
like an oasis in the desert.
Yeah, you fully believe that this is it. The change is here. I'm creating this change, and this is me. This is the new me.
Yeah.
And we're all so convinced. We've all been in that position. But you kind of quickly realize that when motivation goes, oh shit, I've bit off way more than I can chew here, and I just can't do this. And then something gives. You have the little piece of chocolate that you promised yourself you wouldn't have, and then that's just the first crack. And the dam starts to, come down. Yeah. That big, massive dam that you've built on very, very weak foundations, it crumbles. Yeah. So BJ Fogg is probably one of the leading guys in the world on behavioral change. He's a professor in Stanford, and he heads up the behavioral change lab. The guys who created Instagram actually were his students. Very interestingly, so they use a lot of his behavioral science insights to create Instagram initially.
To keep us fucking scrolling.
Yeah, Instagram is a very deliberate kind of master plan, and it takes advantage of our common flaws in psychology or inner psychology.
Yeah.
So he's done a lot of research around behavioral change, and he said that there's only 3 ways to create lasting behavior change. And the first one is to have an epiphany, which, is impossible to command.
I call it the heart attack. I do.
Why do you call it
in the health sense,
exactly.
Most people wait for the heart attack to make a change to their lifestyle because I'm fucking grand. But the heart attack comes, I'm mortal, I could die tomorrow. That's the epiphany for them. So I call that the heart attack, yeah.
Yeah, and it's an amazing analogy, or it's an amazing example even. People, they realize or they have a heart attack and they're like, whoa, it's a shock to the system. Yeah. And maybe it's something else. Maybe someone else passes in their family. Maybe something significant happens that really forces them. It's a shock to the system, and they step back and they're like, whoa, I need to create change.
Yeah.
And same, I've had, like my brother, for example, he fell into he had his life together and everything was great, but he just kind of got into the habit of having a few bottles in the evening. And then this was quite consistent.
Yeah.
And he went to the doctor, and the doctor did a test on him and basically said, listen, you're destroying yourself here.
Yeah.
And if you don't stop, you're going to be dead in the next 10 years.
Wow. What age is he?
He was, he's 34 at the time.
Yeah.
35. And he would have been quite partial to the session when he was younger. He was pretty wild in his own way. So obviously that's all conditions on the system, and he wasn't very fit or athletic. Very productive and amazing what he does in the company, and has a beautiful family and everything. And nothing ever. He was always very responsible in that way, but just habit of having a few drinks in the evening.
Just a bad habit.
Just a bad habit and a comfortable habit. And when he got that message, he had an epiphany. And the epiphany was whoa, I could be dead in 10 years. My children are young, I have a young family. And that epiphany was big enough and strong enough that he created change in his life. He started running. He got into running. He got into cycling. He became obsessed with it. He stopped drinking, and he got into swimming. He started doing triathlons. He went and got like lessons off one of the leading Olympic coaches in Ireland.
Wow.
He started getting paying to get analysis on his cycling, and just he's so deep into it. He was signed up for the Ironman and half Ironman in Barcelona last year, and then COVID happened. So, that's an example of an epiphany that created dramatic change.
Yeah.
But we can't do that on command. We can't just click our fingers and be like, give me an epiphany.
Yeah.
So it's unreliable. But it is a way to create behavior change. So if anybody out there knows how to,
manifest an epiphany,
let me know. We can monetize that potentially. And then the second one was change your environment. So, if you move to a new house,
just gonna point this at your mouth.
Sorry. So, if you move to a new environment, so I found this with traveling. When I was living at home, I had all my habits and I was very disciplined, and I just, fell into them very naturally. But then one of the negatives about traveling is you're in such a constant state of entering new environments that your body can't rely on automatic behavior, the kind of habitual behavior.
Yeah.
So you're sucked into the present. And when you're sucked into the present, whether you're in a new environment, whether you move house or whatever, that's an opportunity for you to ingrain new habits, because the existing habitual behavior isn't showing up in the new environment. You know what I mean?
It's like if I can't see the biscuits, I probably won't eat the biscuits.
Yeah.
If I don't buy the biscuits, it's kind of a bigger version of that. Yeah.
Exactly. Like, when you go home this evening, you're going to walk into your house and you're probably going to behave in a way that is predictable.
Yeah.
You're going to go in, you're probably going to put your keys somewhere, you'll take your shoes off and put them in the same place, you'll turn the kettle on, you'll, go in and talk to Jill. There's probably a predictability there to how you'll behave, because that's your habitual behavior that's created an automatic way of being, and that's to preserve energy ultimately. But if you were to move house next week, that would upset that.
Yeah.
Which is an opportunity for habit change.
Okay. Yeah.
So we all kind of do that, though. We can't just choose to move environment. That's unreliable as well.
Yeah.
We all live in our houses and we have our ways of being and our job. So it's kind of very challenging and not very practical for most. And then the third and most practical is start small. So simple. So simple.
So simple.
But, so...
Everyone's waiting for the big, what does it tell me? It starts small.
Start small. And, he has a website. It's called Tiny Habits.
Yeah.
He has a book. It's called Tiny Habits. And if you go onto the website, he does a 5-day program where you sign up, you enter your email, and he'll send you information to kind of set a foundation of how to think about this. I recommend everyone do it. tinyhabits.com, BJ Fogg. What he says is, start small, and he does some really interesting diagrams about motivation and action and creating change. But ultimately, if you want to create lasting behavioral change, you need to make it easy. You need to make it simple. It's one of, I would say personally, in my own experience, the most effective ways to actually create change. Make it so simple. So if it's you want to meditate, just commit to meditating for 30 seconds a day for a week. Easy. So easy that how could you not do it?
Yeah.
And then the week later, a minute. And then the week later, a minute and a half. And then 2 minutes. And before you know it, this is very much like it's an up curve. It's not linear. It goes dramatically up. It's exponential.
It is exponential growth. Yeah.
And then you can break that down to anything. It's the gym. He gives an example, and this could be a bit extreme, but one of his clients, I think it was one of his clients, who had a lot of weight on him and wanted to join the gym. So what he actually did, he got a gym membership and he committed to only going for 5 minutes. So he'd rock up to the gym, he'd go in for 5 minutes, and then he'd leave. And he stuck with that, and he stayed with it.
Getting there is the hardest part.
I know. And, it seems so silly, but it's kind of remarkable in its own way, because what he did is he created conditions that were so easy for him to follow, that how could he not follow? And he worked on integration and implementation. So he got into the habit of getting in his car, driving to the gym, walking into the gym, working out for a little bit, which is not actually the most important thing initially. The act of doing it, it's more the integration and creating the habit of going through with that
The process.
The process.
Yeah.
And then he done that, and then he just built up the time, and he got into the habit of doing it, and he built it up slowly and created small, lasting change. And that ultimately led him to, shedding, I think it was like over 100 pounds, and got into amazing shape and lasting shape, not this yo-yo kind of diet that many of us suffer from, where we do extreme diets and then we lose significant weight and then we pile that weight back on and more. Plus more. And, that's very real. So very simple, but very, very profound. And in hindsight, that's what I did. And now when I was starting out on my journey, I committed to once a week. The first week I went on one cycle, 1.5 kilometers. I think it was less. It's still on Strava, 2012. I was only looking at it there the last couple of months. I think it was around August. And I was in bits, it was hard in its own way, but, I didn't go out in this massive 20K and I was ruined. And then I was too afraid because I couldn't do the 20K again. And that's something that we do. I think we set our standards too high, where the first time we'll set the bar so high that if we're not exceeding that bar, at least living up to it, then what's the point?
Yeah.
That
I think that's a key. I was thinking in my head there, I was going to say when you paused, people think that this is so small, there's no way it could possibly elicit the change I want. I need to do something big. And they don't have the trust in that long-term system. I'm going to do this, but I'm not going to see the results because we're used to, I'm going to press this button and I'm going to get something straight away. Yeah. I'm not going to see the results for a month or a year or a decade. It's a decade's extreme, I know that, but it's difficult to conceptualize this small little 30 seconds of meditation. What the fuck is that? 5 minutes in the gym. That's not going to give me 6-pack. I need to do 6-minute abs. Yeah. It's difficult for people to trust that process.
Yeah. It is, and I understand that because we want immediate gratification. That's how we operate as humans. It's the human condition.
Even more now.
We want everything right now. Right now.
And in most cases, we can have it. We can have food, we can have entertainment, we can have
absolutely. And
anything.
That supports that behavior.
Yeah.
And it supports that kind of inclination to only seek instant gratification.
Yeah.
But developing how would you say, a relationship with delayed gratification is a discipline in itself that can be cultivated, and you can capitalize on behavioral science to cultivate that discipline also, I think.
Like the marshmallow test?
Yeah, like the marshmallow test.
Who ran the marshmallow test? Jill's always telling me that.
I read the book. Was
there a book as well?
Yeah, there's a book because it's a very famous...
Sorry, Dan, I'm just going to point this at you again.
Yeah. Apologies. It's a very famous experiment.
Yeah.
And...
just explain. People may probably know, but just in case anyone hasn't heard of it.
It's a psychologist that conducted this experiment with children, and what they did was they had a child sitting in a room, and they went in and they gave them the option to eat one marshmallow straight away, or wait for 15 minutes as the psychologist or the person left the room. And if they were able to wait for the 15 minutes, they get 2 marshmallows.
I'd be all over that one marshmallow.
I think I would be as well.
All over it.
I think I would be as well. So they had a camera in the room, and you can go on and type this into YouTube, and you can kind of see some of the video footage from little children, and it's very endearing. But what they demonstrated with that kind of experiment was they'd done this experiment multiple times, and they followed a lot of these candidates over a prolonged period of time. And what the research suggested is people who were able to refrain from eating the marshmallow, wait till the end of the 15 minutes, had more kind of probability of success, and had kind of increased probability of how they conducted themselves and discipline and relationship with themselves. I'm not completely savvy with the exact kind of research that came out of it. I remember reading the book and it was really compelling. But then I spoke to a friend that's a psychologist after, and she mentioned how some of these notions had been questioned and debunked since. So I need to kind of explore that a bit more to understand it. But
it illustrates the point.
What it illustrates is when you can reframe and hold off from instant gratification, there's other benefits that come with that. That are very.
If you can trust something small now, there's two sides to this coin. I think either trusting if I sacrifice something now, it could lead to greater gain in the future.
Yes.
Or if I invest something really small now that I don't believe is worthy, I'll just have to trust that in the future that's going to grow into something that is worthy, such as an easy habit.
Exactly. And when you eat that marshmallow straight away, you're impulsive.
Yeah.
You're being impulsive, you're not controlling yourself.
Yeah.
And that impulsive behavior spills over.
Yeah.
That means that when anytime temptation presents itself, the chances of you giving into that are pretty high.
Yeah.
So if you take control and you can refrain from eating that marshmallow, and there is interesting kind of evidence and techniques to how to overcome that. So, for example, they found that what happens is when a person is looking at the marshmallow, there's a part of their brain that is referred to by some as the hop part of the brain, which is the impulsive part of the brain. It's the kind of primitive part of the brain that we have.
The monkey lizard brain.
The monkey lizard brain that's probably most prominent and was around long before the prefrontal cortex was developed. So that part of the brain is getting triggered, and that makes you very impulsive.
It's not the limbic system, is it?
I'm not sure.
Jill's going to be shouting at the
I'm not sure.
The radio.
But when they questioned the children who who managed to not eat the marshmallow for 15 minutes, what they found was that they used strategies. So some of them hid the marshmallow, and others would think about the marshmallow in a more kind of abstract way. So they'd think about the shape of the marshmallow and they'd think about it more logically. And what they were actually doing is they were engaging their coal system, as some refer to it, which is the prefrontal cortex. And they were engaging a different part of their brain. And by engaging that part of their brain, they became less impulsive. They took control over that. So how I think about that is, if I'm trying to avoid eating the sweets and the press, as opposed to thinking about like salivating about, oh, they're so delicious, I want them, like so good, the hot brain,
have to pull yourself back constantly.
And nearly experiencing like how good they're going to be, and then all the triggers that come with that, like just trying to break it down and be like, well, they're just in a box and they're sugar, and trying to see it in a different perspective that would engage the prefrontal cortex and make you less likely to act with impulse.
That's very interesting. Brian O'Hengus, I don't know if you heard him speak on the podcast. He actually mentioned this when it came to specifically eating, about actually thinking about what it was, the piece of food you're about to eat, and not to demonize the chocolate bar, but think about it.
Yeah.
Taste it. Touch the wrapper, look at it, smell it, because we do a lot of unconscious reactionary eating with watching TV, shove a couple of chocolate bars in our face. His explanation and my experience since trying it have both matched up in that when you're looking at it, you kind of start to think differently about it. Like, it's not really as appealing as I thought it was before. I still want the chocolate bar, and you have a little bite, and you sit there and you sit with what does this taste like when they feel? And in most cases, I found anyway, the experience isn't what I thought it was. And that kind of mad desire for it goes away because I've spent some time thinking about what it actually is. And then as well as that, the logical side of this isn't actually good for you comes in as well. And I'm not demonising the chocolate bar. If I want the chocolate bar, I have the chocolate bar still. But I'm a lot more considerate. And most of the times now, I don't have the chocolate bar.
Yeah.
And it's just different. I suppose it kind of links in what you're talking about. I'm going to that cold side.
Yes.
And I'm considering it. I'm using a lot. Why am I actually eating this? Do I want this? Now, to a lot of people, a lot of this sounds unattractive. Because
it's nerdy.
It's nerdy. And it requires, and now I'm going to say what it sounds like it does. It sounds like it requires a huge amount of discipline. I have to think about everything I eat. I don't have time. But it actually doesn't. When you start to do these things, implement these things, to practice, try them, you realise wasn't actually that difficult to do.
Of course.
I built it up in my head.
Yeah.
So if that was easy to do, why don't I do another little easy thing that might be easy to do? And then it snowballs and grows and grows and grows.
Definitely. And what I would suggest to everyone is not actually try to change all your habits at once.
Yeah.
Even to eating, like, don't think about eating. Think about exercise, And I mentioned this, I think to you, and we talked about this a lot, is like Keystone Habits.
Yeah.
So we all kind of try to change a specific habit. Maybe it's stop smoking. Maybe it's get up earlier. Maybe it's walk more, whatever, etc. But there's habits out there that are referred to as keystone habits. And what a keystone habit is it's a habit that if you focus on this one habit, you won't just change that one specific habit. That will have a rippling effect in your life that in ways that you're not even fully conscious of, and it will ripple out and create massive behavioral change. So exercise is a keystone habit. And excuse me. A burp there. To me, exercise is the most probably important and most powerful keystone habit and behavior to take control of. Because what happens, and what I find happens, and I know others as well find this that I've talked to about it, is when you take control of exercise and you focus on that one thing and you make that, you orientate your kind of goals around that, and you start to create that change, and the impact that has, and then you know this as well, on a physiological level.
I rely on it.
Yeah, exercise is just potent.
Yeah.
If you could put exercise in a pill, it'd be one of the most expensive pills, because the impact it has on the brain and the body, and how it enhances parts of the brain, and how it just changes. Like, I think I'm a completely different person without exercise in my life, you know?
Yeah.
And I think you'd agree.
I would agree.
If I'm not exercising for a while, I am not the way I am normally. I'm a very different.
I'm a terror.
I'm a different Darren. I'm a grumpy man.
Yeah.
I'm a grumpy man. I can be, and I just change, and I notice that the lazy kind of tendencies seep in, and I become lazy in many other ways. I don't want to do this and I don't want to do that, and etc., etc. But when I take control of my exercise, like I have done for the most part over the last 10 or 11 years, with big exceptions, big moments of not exercising and falling into that trap on multiple occasions, life is different, and I, when I focus on that exercise and just get that in control, I'm less likely to indulge in these other behaviors and habits that aren't favorable, like eating shitty food, like putting crap into my body, or having lazy tendencies. Because just focusing on this one keystone habit, it seems to like upgrade your whole system. So you have more energy in other ways, you interact with people differently, your behavior changes in subtle ways, you're just kind of more inclined to want to put good food into your body and take care of yourself. And I think that exercise is the biggest driver of this kind of desire. And to try implement these changes without exercise, it's tough. It's really hard. It's like having a fishing line with no bait.
yeah, it's a good way of putting it. Yeah, definitely. What's up, guys? Yes, I'm still interrupting my own podcast with more of my own voice, narcissism inception. But I just wanted to give you a little break to remind you that today's guest is the mighty Darren Hendrick, and we're riffing on human performance, habit, the hierarchy of needs, purpose, happiness, and the mysterious NEXOA. If you want to get in touch with me or Darren about anything, but probably about something you heard in this episode, drop me a DM on Instagram at PrymalPro, PRYMALPRO, or head over to the episode notes at www.prymal.ie/Darren H. Enjoy the rest of the episode. That actually really nicely segues us into, I'm going to utter this word for the first time on the airways, is NEXOA, and this whole idea of NEXOA that we had.
Yes.
Because this, what we've spoken about there, I don't know how long we're speaking, maybe an hour or so, maybe 45 minutes. I don't actually know. Fish is in charge of that now.
Yeah.
When we have these conversations, we've had many of these over the last 18 months,
yes,
as I said.
Many.
And every time we do, it becomes very clear to both of us, and usually anyone else we have when we're having these conversations, that there's something that has to happen here for us to be able to take the kind of information that you have and that I have and that all these wonderful people that we talk to have, and that most people have something to contribute. There needs to be some form of community or a way for, because a lot of people have heard what you've explained beautifully about BJ Fogg and habits and starting easy and starting small and exercise and food, and we talk about this kind of stuff a lot, and most people have heard some form of this, and yet still really struggle to implement because they're battling the modern world and responsibility, and it's very hard. And what becomes really clear to me and you when we talk, and where this NEXOA came from, which I will explain now in a second, is this desire for us to help ourselves, and by extension other people, to realize a lot more. There's like, this information is available. We have it. We're super privileged nowadays. We've access to it. We've access to the world's minds. It's a collective, but it's fragmented.
It's fragmented and it's hidden beneath a lot of crappy information.
Intentionally, in some cases. This is not a conspiracy theory podcast, but it's in, like you explained Instagram there, it's intentionally designed to draw your attention.
And it's the biases that we have, like negativity bias.
We have negativity bias.
We're inclined towards negative input, which makes us more partial to consume like news and information around kind of surface level maybe not surface level is the right word, but negative input that really doesn't actually add a lot of value to our own lives. You know, it's just it's a mental masturbation in a way.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
it is, yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I actually had this conversation with Jill the other day there about, like, there's a lot of stuff going on in the world, and it's good to be informed.
Yes,
I don't think it's not good to be informed. It's important. But it's not good to consume everything and consider that your identity.
No.
You're a part of this thing, this monster of information. That's not who you are. We lose ourselves in that, which makes it really difficult to do any of this stuff, have a personal philosophy, build habits, because we don't even know what we are. We can't spend 5 minutes because it's constantly being taken from us by this consumption of information. Now, there's massive benefits to this, which is kind of, there is a caveat there. There's huge benefits to having access to all this stuff, but being mindful of that is something that's really difficult. So when we chat, we have all these conversations, we talk about habits, we talk about all these different wonderful things. It's very clear that we, me and you and everybody would really benefit from some other form of access to this information, help with implementing it, a community to grow together.
Yes.
So we started to, there's something there, man, and a bit of back and forth.
Much discussion.
Much
brainstorming.
And it kind of came out of us, both of us.
Yeah.
In a process that took a couple of months, but it just came out of us.
It did, very organic.
And it was very organic. And it's this concept that we now call NEXOA, which I'll explain some of it and I'll let you explain some of it.
Of course.
It's a joint venture, but NEXOA essentially came from a combination of the word nexus and NOA. And NOA for us was normalization, optimization, and actualization.
Yeah, shout out to David Farrell. You know, he kind of inspired that abbreviation.
100%, absolutely, and that NOA, that process to us was again inspired by many things. One of which was Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Probably the biggest one is Maslow's, in my opinion. You know, maybe you have a different perspective on this.
No, 100%.
But the NOA abbreviation, you know, think about it as a pyramid that is inspired by Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And if nobody knows about Maslow, Abraham Maslow, he's a very prominent American psychologist, and he is one of the kind of founders or leading pioneers of positive psychology, which was a kind of more recent branch of psychology. Up until that point, much of the kind of research that was conducted in psychology was around the negative aspects of the human mind and like schizophrenia and all these mental disorders that wreak havoc on the human condition. So there was the new school of kind of positive psychology, from what I understand, where the likes of Abraham Maslow started thinking about the other side of the coin. You know, how can we actually get the most out of the mind? Like, what's the potential here? And in his research, he discovered and came up with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is a very respected body of research in psychology, as far as I know. And what he established was that we have layers. And I say on the first layer, the most important conditions are like food, shelter, safety. You know, these are really important psychological conditions. And then...
So just for people to visualize that, imagine like the food pyramid. The bottom of the food pyramid is that first layer,
Exactly. So, you know, for us, we have that.
Yeah.
But in many countries, people worry daily and stress daily about, will they have food? You know, will they be able to stay in this house for much longer? Will they have enough shelter to support their family? And are they safe? Are they in an environment that's safe? And if them conditions aren't met, well, then that's very limiting on one's psychology. But if they are met, then you can kind of branch out to the next kind of layer, which I believe is kind of like, you know, tribal belonging, community, you know, income, maybe. And then after that, it's like status in society. It's, you know, creating something of yourself, if you will. And maybe I'm being a bit vague with the specifics there, but they're kind of interchangeable within reason. So if you can get them reasonably met, them needs, what Maslow kind of discovered is you can get to the top of the pyramid, which is self-actualization. And kind of what self-actualization is a person's, you know, ability to realize one's full potential. So given that all the below conditions are in order, you can start to think about, you know, how do I want to actually realize my potential? How do I want to explore myself? What can I actually do? Do I want to be a musician? Do I want to be a creative? Do I want to do all these things? And we're very fortunate because we live in a society where most of the bottom layers are met. you know, and we are very privileged to be in that position because many people aren't, you know. 3.5 billion people in the world have very little, you know, and you know, 2.5 billion people haven't even got a bank account or financial inclusion. So we have that freedom. So really important research, very important figure in academia, in psychology. So to me, what the kind of NOAA abbreviation, normalization, optimization, actualization is inspired and kind of derived from that body of research. And how I think we both think about it is, you know, the bottom layer of our pyramid is normalization. You know, what are the kind of most important components for a person to achieve the best chance stability or normalization? How can they create a framework that will allow them to navigate the absolute chaos of life in the smoothest possible way?
Which we've touched on with personal philosophies, habit
Yes,
formation.
exactly. They all belong.
They all belong in that, because we don't have to worry about shelter and food for the most part. We're very lucky.
Yeah.
But we have other things that
we have. And I think some of the components that we mentioned and some of the components that we're considering and still developing are exercise.
Yeah.
So important. You know, whatever that looks like, you know, but just moving the body. Like historically, we've done that most of the time, and it's so unusual for the body just to be sitting around not actually moving. So that's really important. Eating well. Yeah. Sleep. Yeah. Really important. Getting outside, you know, being exposed to sunlight. Ireland has a massive vitamin D deficiency, which, you know, is concerning. Trinity conducted a pretty substantial study over a couple of years and clearly demonstrated the correlation between mood and vitamin D, and how like the vitamin D deficiency can result in potential depression. You know, the research suggested that, which is fascinating. Yeah. So getting outside, really important, and real social connection. Yeah. You know, like really connecting with people, being authentic, being real, and you know, not like the kind of surface level relationships that we tend to cultivate in Irish society, which are amazing. They're fun, and it's what makes us, you know, so kind of famous and loved around the world, is our ability to have the crag. But I think that's been detrimental in many ways, because we shy away from, you know, real connection. Yeah. And that's very important, I believe, and I think you believe so as well.
Absolutely.
And they're kind of the key components, I think, and maybe there's more to be explored there, you know, such as what we touched on. Yeah. But if you get them relatively in order and them components together, you are giving yourself the best chance creating a standard of normalization in your life. And then when you get them into order, you can start considering optimization, which is the next layer of our pyramid. And optimization, I suppose, is how do I enhance the mind? How do I enhance the brain? How can I actually start, you know, I've created the foundation. Now I want to explore my potential, and I want to see how I can stretch myself. And there's different tools that you can indulge in to take advantage of this. And one of the most powerful ones I've found is writing. You know, deliberately using a pen or a keyboard and taking action and making decisions about your life and engaging ultimately in a conversation with yourself. Very powerful. Meditation, really powerful. And we know that, you know, after 8 weeks of meditating for as little as 10 minutes a day has real physiological impressions on the brain. It influences the part of the brain that's responsible for emotional regulation, memory, the hippocampus, you know, the amygdala, which is responsible for fear and can express itself with like social anxiety. I think I could be wrong on that. So we know that, like, you know, meditation is real. It's not like woo-woo. Like there's a overwhelming body of research that clearly demonstrates this is a powerful, powerful technique. You know, so I see a society in the future where this is just like, you know, exercising, and I think it should be. Breath work, you know, Wim Hof breathing. Paddy does it out at the beach, you know. Paddy Douglas, he's trained with Wim Hof for a year. There's many other Wim Hof instructors. This has real physiological impressions on the body and the mind. Release adrenaline, and it's very enhancing, and gives you immense energy that allows you to navigate life and get more out of yourself. Others that come to mind are nootropics, which are like supplements that have natural ingredients that influence parts of the brain that are responsible for cognitive performance and memory. So that's another tool. And there's many more, certain types of stretching, maybe like affirmations can be one, like very powerful technique that are, kind of have a lot of weird negative connotations. But when you actually look at that and you think about it from a very rational perspective, they're very powerful. Any others that you can think of there? Like just
as a conceptual. Go on.
I was just going to think one more that I've been thinking about recently is like psychologist.
Yeah.
I think that I also think we're going to live in a society that everybody has a psychologist. There's always been such baggage around having a psychologist.
As in, you must be crazy.
You must be crazy. There must be something wrong with you. Like, listen, the reality is that we all carry our cross. We all have baggage. We're all at the mercy of human conditioning, and we all have shit that we carry. It's just simple as, And if you try to tell me that you don't, I don't believe you. Yeah. Simple. Yeah. We all have crap in our system, whether we're aware of it or not. And when you have a professional there that's trained and understands the mind, the most powerful machine that we understand in the whole universe, or we don't understand actually in many ways, we're aware of. When you can have that opportunity to go in and actually have a very professional discussion with them and just a very, conversational and start to address how you've been conditioned and how your upbringing and whatever else comes with it has conditioned you and shaped you. When you can start to address that, you can start to free yourself from the shackles that many of us have and the negative impressions that have shaped many of us that ultimately lead to insecurities and other internal baggage. So I think that, really, really important, and just like step back and just, kind of address the fact that it's okay to go and chat to somebody, it's actually important. And what you're doing is you're taking care of yourself and you're nourishing your body and mind, and that's okay. That's good.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, just as you've gone into great detail there, I'm just going to give people more of a conceptual, bigger picture view of what...
Bit of a riff there.
It was great, and it covers all the bases that we're looking at here.
Yeah, and just to
go ahead.
Polish it off there, briefly, because there's more components here that... much more components that tie into the normalization and optimization, but the kind of... vision that we have is if you get these reasonably in order and you start, getting a grip over these, you can actually start tapping into that actualization level of the pyramid, which means you can start realizing your own potential in whatever domain you want to access. If you want to learn how to play an instrument, if you want to upskill, if you want to learn new information and you want to change, you're giving yourself the best opportunity to do that as efficiently as you can.
Definitely.
So that's kind of the
cherry on top. That's what we're trying to get to. Yeah. And essentially, that's where people are trying to get to. And I think nowadays, especially in our world, where we all consider ourselves highly intelligent, motivated, educated people in a very developed country where we're all doing very important things all the time, and that's how we identify. Most of what's pitched at us is optimization. And a huge amount of what people do is they want, and I had this conversation with someone before, I can't remember exactly who it was, maybe it was David O'Connor, about it shouldn't all be about trying to optimize, always be better. And what I tended to see a lot of the time was people were focusing on this optimization, the latest supplement, the latest this, the latest that, the latest technique, the latest Wim Hof, the latest whatever. Gadgets and all that kind of stuff. But they had no normalization done. They didn't have the personal philosophy. They didn't have a basic rudimentary understanding of how their body worked, or exercise and nutrition, or relationships or community.
Of course.
They didn't have any of the normalization stuff done. But we're being pitched all of the optimization stuff. So looking at this NEXOA pyramid, this hierarchy, we're trying to display and create a community around the fact that this is a programming thing, like you've mentioned before.
Conditioning.
And you need to recognize what stage of that process you're at. And most people will realize very quickly that there's a huge amount more normalization to be done. But once that's done, the optimization stuff starts to make a lot more sense and starts to kind of surf on that wave of momentum you've built with normalization, and all of the habits that you're trying to form and the things you're trying to do and the time you're trying to be more effective with, the relationships you're trying to cultivate, the job you're trying to do, suddenly makes a lot more sense and becomes a lot easier, and there's techniques to enhance that and improve that, and then you're really on the journey towards that actualization. Now it's an endless pyramid. There's no top,
and you have a solid foundation there given what you're saying. And it's important to acknowledge that this is a lot, what we're talking about.
It's everything. It's life.
It's everything it is. And I can easily see how somebody listening to this would just be like so intimidated by the prospect of all of this, and just, wow, this is way too much for me. And what I would say to that is, if you do have a desire to change, what else are you going to be doing with your time? Time is going to pass. You're going to die. We're going to all die.
We're all going to die.
We're all going to die.
Nothing matters.
You know what I mean? Well, in some senses, ultimately, it doesn't. Life is very short.
Yeah.
The Earth is 4.5 billion years old, and we might live to 80 years. We are insects.
I'm going for 100. I'm going for a century.
The way we look at, butterflies and such, and ants, and their lifespan, that's us as well, in a universal way. So, ultimately, that's the end that we all share. It's a very common end, and I think it's very important that we all acknowledge that, and that's very much a prominent part of Stoicism. But just knowing that life's going to pass anyway, and it's not about trying to get all this under wraps and trying to do everything, but it's just looking at it as a process, and you're just trying to take control, and you're trying to maybe upgrade, or you're trying to work in a certain direction, and there's a satisfaction in that.
But what's the bottom line? People want to feel better.
Yes.
On a daily basis.
Yes.
That's the point. And it's a cliche, if you die tomorrow, blah, blah, blah. But this deathbed, this eulogy analogy, and I know Brian O'Loughlin uses this a lot as well, but this analogy of what's important to you if you're lying on your deathbed and you're looking back.
Yeah.
That's the point.
It's powerful exercise.
I want to feel good today,
very powerful
and tomorrow,
exercise,
and the next day. What happens in 50 years' time if I make a lot of money and retire, grand, whatever, it doesn't really matter. And what I trust when I listen and hear that, and where this NEXOA thing came from, is when you look at people who are there in their 70s and 80s on their deathbed, every single one of them says the same thing.
Yeah.
It wasn't about the money I made, or it was about the daily, what I did on a daily basis.
And who they were.
And who I was.
There's a book called The 5 Regrets of the Dying, I think it is.
I haven't read it, I've heard of it though.
And essentially what they do is interview people who are on their deathbed.
Which is, if there's anything you're going to listen to, it's someone who's done it.
Exactly.
And they're there.
And it's very interesting to see the similarities in all of these people. Yeah. What actually was important. And there's a lot of kind of people in the self-improvement realm, if you will. That word has negative connotations. But who talk about exercise. And I've done these exercises a couple of times, and they're really powerful. So if it's something you're interested in, I recommend everybody do it, because it will strip away a lot of the fluff in life and will highlight what's actually important. And one of the exercises is, imagine yourself at your own funeral. Your time has come. Life has passed, and you're at your own funeral, which is going to happen. It's happening. Unless you can figure out a way to stay alive.
I'm trying, man.
That day is coming for all of us.
Yeah.
And think about how you would want your family to speak about you. How do you want to be remembered? What are the important attributes that you want people to discuss and you would like to see at that moment, at that day? What are the 5 kind of words that you would like ingrained on your headstone? And what you find is, when you look at this and you get people to conduct these exercises separately, a lot of people come up with the same answers. It's not about what they achieved, and it's not about the money they made or whatever. It's about who they were, how they treated people, how they conducted themselves, the memories they created with their families, how they took care of themselves, and all these kind of much more meaningful and real behaviors, I suppose.
Fact.
And it's a really, really powerful exercise, and I think it's something that we should all do, because us in Irish society, we have this really weird relationship with death. We shy away from it. It's very taboo. We don't talk about it. But, it's one of these things that we're all going to face. And in Stoicism, a lot of these Stoics would meditate on death regularly. They call it, it's a technique called negative visualization. And you kind of just, when you think about the fact that you're going to die in a certain perspective, it can be kind of fear invoking for some people if, you don't enter it with a certain perspective. But when you acknowledge this, it really kind of makes you realize, whoa, like my time is limited. It is finite. I am not here forever. And you kind of quickly identify what's unimportant.
Yeah.
Where your attention is going. Do I want to be really wasting my energy being upset with this person for that thing that they said, or, hold on to these grudges with people or family? You kind of realize, well, if I'm going to die and they're all going to die, this is silly. This is silly nonsense. So not only is there a benefit in, thinking about death and considering it, we're actually doing ourselves a big disservice by not, I think.
1,000%. 1,000%. And it is, again, it's something people have heard over and over and over again. To do that exercise, do it.
Do it.
When you do it, I know everyone knows this,
Yeah.
but there's a difference between knowing something and doing something. I'm an expert in that. I'm an expert in knowing things and not doing them, and now I'm starting to do a lot of the things. I'm like, whoa.
Absolutely.
It will absolutely, if it doesn't blow your mind, you can come in here, I'll give you a free cup of coffee.
Oh.
It'll blow your mind.
Really powerful exercise when I done it.
It's incredible, yeah.
I remember doing it and reading over, and it was such an intense moment.
Yeah.
It was really powerful. It left a big impression. I actually done it from reading a book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Yeah.
Great book. Recommend it if it's something you're interested in. He does that exercise. He talks you through it. But if you don't want to read the book, you can just type it into Google, end of life eulogy.
Interesting. There's how to manifest, self-manifest an epiphany. Think about the fact, really embrace the fact you're going to die.
Yes, that is
embrace
a good
that.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
And embrace that and write about it and
feel it. Feel the
it.
fear. And do it anyway.
Yeah.
Famous quote.
Well, that's another powerful thing about it that I've realised myself, the acknowledgement, the consistent acknowledgement that I'm going to die,
Yeah.
and none of
And it
this.
has to be consistent. You have to do this
Yeah,
consistently.
of course.
Yeah.
It is consistent, and it's something that I try to think about regularly enough,
Yeah.
which probably sounds a bit funny. It probably does sound a bit grim, but to me, I don't mind. You know, I'm very comfortable with death. Like, my relationship with it is fine. Like, I'm just like, this is it. If anything, I look forward to I want to live a long and healthy life, but I look forward to getting a bit of peace, from the madness.
Yeah, fair.
When it comes, I want to
yeah.
live a long, healthy, fulfilling life. Very important, but I'm not intimidated. I don't feel intimidated, and that's probably because of my deliberate effort in exploring this. And really exploring, not shying away from it.
You move towards it.
Yeah, I move towards it, and what it's done is it's made me stop caring about what other people think, which is something we all fall prey to due to our historical biological need for survival, which basically resulted in us finding tribes and giving our best selves to belong to that tribe. Because if we didn't stay in the tribe, we'd die. Yeah. So we are the result of hundreds of and thousands of years of people staying in the tribe, which expresses itself in us caring what other people think. And then we're like, I don't care what they think. Yes, you do. We all care what people think. And Instagram and Facebook is platforms that understand this and take advantage of it. They take advantage of it, So really what you're doing on Instagram is you're at the mercy of this very intelligent framework that's been designed to take advantage of your psychological weaknesses, such as the one I'm just talking about. So meditating on death and thinking about it kind of makes you realize that's not important. I actually don't care what they think.
Yeah.
I don't care. And this is not like anybody in particular. It's the kind of fear of what society thinks. Because what happens is when we give into that fear response gets triggered and we think, we're going to die. And that's why it's so powerful, and that's why it has such a grip on us.
To develop on that point, I think we do care, and when you meditate and think about this, you still care. You don't want people to think you're a bad person.
Of course.
You want people to like you and love you.
Yes,
but
definitely.
If you have something about yourself that you fundamentally believe you want to do and you believe you should do, and someone else disagrees with that, that shouldn't change your belief. You still care what they think about you. You want them to like
it's
you.
Input.
You want to get on with people.
It's input, and you want to, give certain people credit for their input.
But you can't necessarily change fundamental beliefs you have based on what other people might think about you, because then you're not being true to yourself, and then you live with that anxiety and fear and lack of purpose and lack of clarity on who you are forever. I think that's what really is powerful, because everyone cares. And I want people to like me. I'll say it right now. I want people to like me. I like getting on with people. I like community. but I'm trying not to let what other people think about the way I live my life change the fundamental structure of how I'm building my life.
Especially Irish society.
It's a horrible, it's a very hard thing to do. I'm struggling with it at the moment, but it's a hard thing to do.
Yeah.
Especially Irish society.
Yeah, we have this cultural attitude of like, who does he think he is? Who does he think he is?
Begrudging.
Like
what is he doing?
Poor U2 and Bono, like, they get an awful time.
Yeah,
it's
poor
like,
U2 and Bono.
If you don't like them, that's fine, but like they're just a band, they're musicians who manage to find a path that they love doing, and like maybe like you don't agree with what they think and what they say and their music, and not like it, but how can you shit on that? Like it's like they followed their path, and that expresses itself all over Ireland, I think, and traveling really gives you that insight, really highlights that.
To certain parts of the world.
Certain parts, yeah. When you have them cross references.
Travel to America, you get a whole different.
Yeah. So that shows up in like, I felt that personally with like, playing the guitar and singing in front of people. It's like, who do I think I am? Like, and like, I wouldn't do that because it's terrifying. Or coming onto a podcast, doing the
imposter syndrome.
Yeah, I did my first podcast last week, but like,
it was amazing.
Thank you very much.
I'm going to link it in the
I appreciate that with Paddy, and his
Do Me Thing podcast.
Douglas, it's a great podcast. Paddy's a good, great guy, worth tapping into, and he hosts Wim Hof sessions out on the beach. There's one this evening on the full moon of every month. A lot of people go out to the dunes, really powerful breathwork techniques, and then we're all going to go into the water and get.
It'll be done by the time this podcast goes out. But.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it will. But it's on every month. It's on every month, and we tap into primal energy. But just
primal
go back.
With a Y, is that?
What was the point? Yeah. What was the point I was making there before that? I'm at the losing track of my thinking.
The
flaws of the mind.
No, we're in a proper flow here. I think is the thing. We were kind of discussing. Jeez, I can't even. I'm gonna have to go back and listen to it now. We're flowing it anyway. I'm sure we'll circle back around.
But we were talking about fear and how it holds us back. Yeah, exactly.
Right, and then the opinion of others where that came from.
That would have stifled me for a long time growing up. I always had a desire to kind of help people and to influence and inspire in some ways or whatever, and just to make a difference, in a way. But I was always stifled about like who I thought I was in the public perception, who I thought my identity was, and what people would think of me, and the kind of judgment and how it might impact my identity and my ego. And another beautiful thing about traveling, you break free from that hole that your culture has over you and your environment and your circle of people. And coming back, I'm just kind of with the relationship I have with death, I'm like, kind of fuck it. Ultimately. Yeah. And not to say that I won't fall to the mercy of this in the future, because I probably will. But that's the baseline I'm developing.
That's a form of self-actualization, because it's a freedom. It's a freedom in your own mind, where you still admittedly have things you're working on and you need to improve on. You still fall victim to the chaos, but essentially you're in a position now where you're not bound as much as most of us are by this fear, this paralysis by analysis, this what would people think syndrome. You're not bound by that as much as, say, I would be or other people would be, for example. We're all in different stages on our journey to get there. And to bring us back to, we started to explain NEXOA and we went off on a ramble there. That's essentially what we're trying and we're planning on doing with this NEXOA concept, this community.
So we're building a hub.
We're building
a community.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a community-driven hub that benefits everybody.
Yeah.
And is for everybody, if you choose.
Which will help people, whatever stage that they're at, to come into that pyramid of normalization, optimization, actualization. That's actually where the next part came from. The nexus, a hub, a central point.
Central meeting point,
central meeting point. It'll facilitate people engaging with all of this information that we hear about all the time at whatever level they're at.
Of course.
And we've explored this concept of a prism where someone comes into this hub, this system, and whatever it is that they need, all the parts of them are spread out for them. Anything you need to work on in your life is available to you through the community and through the resources that we would offer and the community would offer. And we see versions of this. We often say we are NEXOA. Everything we talk about is NEXOA.
Yes.
You see versions of this down on the beach, whether you're with Darren on Portmarnock Beach or you see the people out sea swimming. People are looking for this new hub, this growth. People want this. Do people want to be happier?
Definitely. And you see like the Wim Hof breathwork on Ireland's Fitish family. You see the saunas out at the beach, and like this is all happening even considering the last year of extreme lockdown and etc. But I suspect that much like fitness 10 years ago was only something you did if you wanted to be a bodybuilder. that's not the case now.
No.
People do it to take care of themselves.
Yeah.
That we are trending in this direction. And what ultimately led us both here is because we've been on this path for a long time, and we've had ebbs and flows, but we've been very deliberate in our own kind of self-growth journey. We've explored a lot of different topics. We have many rabbit holes at our back, of all different depths. And we've explored all these topics in their own kind of separate avenues. They haven't been connected. So, meditation, Wim Hof, writing, all the people that we followed, that
nutrition, medicine,
yes,
plant medicine,
exactly, plant medicine,
financial freedom, politics. Everything, because
everything.
Nothing exists in isolation.
No.
And I learned that you learned this a completely different way than I did, and we came to the same realization.
Absolutely.
I learned this from a medical background. All the different systems are all referring to each other, but they all exist separately. And you go to your gynecologist, and you go to your fucking ophthalmologist, and you go to your surgeon, and they're all different systems. But nothing in the human body exists in isolation. Your mind, your body, your muscles, your nerves, your digestive, it's all connected. And I was like, hold on a fucking second. This is not several different things. It's one thing.
It's one thing
to take care of.
Yeah.
And you came to this realization from your own life experience. It's not just the meditation and the note taking and the silent retreats and the Wim Hof. It's everything.
Yeah.
And the degree to which you integrate those different things into your life just completely depends on you, because me and you are human beings.
Of course.
Yet we require different levels of input and different levels of stabilization, different levels of normalization, optimization to get to the actualization. So that's kind of how we came to the point together.
Absolutely. And that's how NEXOA was born, because myself and Danny, we realized that there's so much amazing.
That's me, by the way. You called me Danny. So some people think it's Daniel.
So we came to that realization that there's so much high quality content out there that exists in different avenues that can really benefit and help people take control of their lives. So we created the pyramid, and we, were inspired by Maslow, and we used the prism idea. And essentially what we want to do is we want to create a hub, an online platform initially, and a community. And we want to take the highest quality, best information that is ideally grounded in, legit science, and bring it together and repackage it in a way that's easy to understand, visual, engaging, digestible, and is in one ecosystem that allows people to come in and access it in a structured framework and navigate in a very practical way. And then also there'll be layers to this. If you want to read the kind of visual, easy to understand side of things, you can do that, but then you can go and get more in depth, and you can get more complex, and you can go right down ideally to the actual studies and really read the real data on it that's intricate and complex if you choose. And then we want to bring the best people from all different domains. So it could be Paddy with the Wim Hof, it could be someone else with meditation or nutrition, and we want to bring them into this ecosystem and make them accessible for people through the NEXOA ecosystem, a community-based ecosystem that is for the people, and is by the people in a big way. This is not as much as this is our business. This is kind of very much community-based effort. Would you agree?
That was like the marketing pitch for NEXOA. It's out in the universe now. There's no taking it back.
Yes.
But 100%. 100%.
Yeah. And with a goal, and I think we both share this goal, is imagine a NEXOA epicenter.
Yeah.
Ultimately, this is where we're going.
A physical
location, a monster location.
Yeah.
Where you go here, and this is a community center, and you can go in and you can do resistance training. You can do, stretching. You can do yoga.
You can learn how to cook. You can learn about money. You can
learn about money, financial education,
plant medicine.
There'll be psychologists there working. There'll be infrared sauna. There'll be isolation tanks. There'll be cold therapy. There'd be a massive library where you can go in and read and discuss. There'd be a big music room. Yeah. And, this is just a community centre that people can come down to and just chill out if they don't want to do anything. There'd be a big chill area, and you come in here and you're coming to, access the community and be influenced. Or you can have private seminars or small group seminars. And the things you mentioned there, some amazing outlets as well.
Yeah. There's no real limits to it. But the whole point is to try and help people access this in a world where it's getting more and more difficult to carve out some time for yourself to do this for yourself. And you mentioned something interesting there about a psychologist, and everyone should have a psychologist. And I suppose part of the goal with NEXOA and everything we're doing, podcasts, whatever we do, the goal is the same. It's almost to help people become their own psychologist in a way.
Yeah, give them the tools.
Give them the tools, like teach a man to fish, understand your own needs. And
that quote, just to, elaborate on it, if you want to give the full quote.
Yeah, give a man a fish. What is actually the full quote?
If you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day.
Teach a man to fish, you feed him for his life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you can do that. You can have someone give you the fish, and you can learn how to fish with these tools, and you can start taking control over your own mind. And
I have found for a lot of my life, which I've explained before, if you give me the fish, I'll consume the fish, and then I'm like, what now? But if I know, and I'm using a lot of metaphors here, but if you tell me a piece of information like, oh, you should drink more water, or you should do this habit, or whatever, I'm like, I'll consume that, and I might do it for a little while, and then I'll stop because it's not sustainable for me. But if you teach me, and again, from my background in medicine, this is how I understood this. If I say with the physiotherapy stuff, if I got you in and I helped you with a PNF stretch, you come back to me next week. Great business model. I keep charging you to come into me. But if I explain to you, this is why we're doing this, and hold on a second, let's actually look at your lifestyle and realize why this is happening. And if you understand that, you're probably going to stop it happening again. Yeah. I'm going to do myself out of a patient, but you're going to understand the concepts behind that. You're going to implement it. You're never going to have tight hamstrings again. Well, not never, but you're going to be in control of what happens, and you're going to build your own program, and that suits you way better than anything I could possibly give you.
Yeah.
Now with NEXOA, the theory will be exactly the same.
Yep.
And we're not the experts necessarily.
No.
We're going to bring the experts to the community.
Yes.
We're going to teach people to fish. We're going to give people the tools relevant to their lives,
of course,
that they engage with, that's easy for them to initiate, and that will then elicit this response where people take control. They become their own psychologists. They understand how to, and if obviously we'll have professionals there who can help. Of course,
and access to courses. We'll have access to high quality courses ran by professionals. So if you want to upskill and develop in any particular area that we've mentioned or are developing, you can tap into that, and then all of a sudden you become your own kind of. You become responsible, and you are in a position and have an opportunity to help others. So this becomes a very interchangeable environment where everyone is kind of providing value to each other.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the bottom line comes down to what most of these conversations end up being about is empowerment. It's self-empowerment. It's trying to give people back some sense of ownership over their own well-being, and that's not necessarily health related, but all sorts of well-being. Control
over their life.
Yeah. And it sounds really cliched, but this is the mission. You can hear the two of us here the last half hour there getting lit up about this NEXOA concept, but everyone has this. And what's really interesting for me, really interesting and validating in one way, is everybody we speak to about this.
Yeah.
Everybody who hears about this concept, it rings a bell with them. It's not an alien concept about this helping people gain ownership of their own lives. But most people are like, I don't even know what it is yet, but I want in, I want part of it, I want to be in the community, I want to be on the train. Where are we going? I don't know, but I want on that train. Which reinforces what we said at the start, is people are looking for this. They're looking for a format to empower themselves. An outlet. A way to learn the things that they're struggling to learn at the moment, a way to battle the distractions. As we've touched on, we won't go too deep into the conspiracy theory side of things, but like, there's platforms and systems out there battling for your attention. It doesn't make them evil. It doesn't mean it's the Illuminati behind them. They're battling for your attention. And if they have your attention, it's not on yourself.
And ultimately, it's our brains which are remarkable. But it's us against supercomputers.
It's us against numbers, zeros and ones, algorithms.
Against very, very powerful machines that have been designed to, grab our attention.
Yeah, and it works.
I
fall victim to it every day.
It's a very, very powerful, persuasive, form of manipulation.
Yeah,
I think ultimately.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And the real reason for having that conversation is not to let's go tear down Instagram or Facebook.
No,
it's not about that.
No.
They're amazing.
I use them myself.
I use them as
well, of course. But I manage them. They don't own me.
They don't own you.
They don't own me, which is hard.
It's very hard. And personally, I'll say this because it'll resonate with people. I flip between being owned by it and more nowadays. It's more so I recognise after 5 minutes I'm like, I am mindlessly scrolling. Yes.
I
turn it off, put it away, go for a walk, come back, reset, and go again.
Yeah.
But that's become part of my personal philosophy. I've I've now built that into my own set of standards and rules because I can recognize it's pulling me away from things that make me feel good, and I end up feeling brutal after it.
Yeah, and what do you actually get out of it? You know,
Entertainment, distraction, connection with people on a very superficial level. So I get it.
Yeah, and you know the negatives can be is that you're like, you know, you're tapping in to a primal side of yourself that has a tendency to compare and reference other people's lives, and then look back and reflect on your own, which can be very, belittling for yourself.
Yeah.
You know, if you're in a bad place or whatever, and you're looking and you see how amazing apparently everyone's life is.
Comparisons, the thief of joy, man.
And we have the we're conditioned to do that in an automatic way.
Yeah.
You know, so you have to override that. But if you're interested in this topic, there's a fantastic podcast with Rich Roll, who's an endurance kind of ultra marathon runner, and
there's a lot more than that now. He's
an amazing guy. He has his own podcast.
He's a modern mind.
Modern mind.
Yeah.
He's a very important figure in society.
Yeah.
And Cal Newport, who's a computer scientist, but has done a lot of study about how our relationships with our phones is impacting the brain on a real level. And interestingly enough, he thinks that in about 10 years that we will look at a child using a phone the way we would look at a child smoking a cigarette right now, because of how detrimental it is to attention and the development of the brain. So I think it's a really important listen. I think that if you have some time, or make time.
Send us the link. I'll put it in the
I'll put it in
the show notes.
Really good podcast, and it's kind of worrying. It's concerning.
Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of seems, some people think that it's alarmist, and something that we discuss sometimes is a lot of people exist in this, it's grand, and they are living in just a kind of a grey, keep going. And
get hit by a bus.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. But they when they hear things like, phones are being compared to cigarettes, they're like, would you come on, it's not that bad. But that's for me anyway, that's a refusal to acknowledge what's actually happening nowadays. It's not alarmist. It's not, oh my God, the world is ending. We live in an amazing time if you can understand how you're designed and how you can harness that to navigate the challenges. If you just ride the wave, you're going to be one of these, it's grand, they're only phones, it's fine.
Yeah. Well,
that is an absolute refusal to acknowledge what's happening.
It is, and just a simple example is you're conditioning your attention all the time. You know, and if you're spending time on a phone and you're scrolling and you're being exposed so constantly to different streams of information, so you notice one picture, one article, and then you go on to the next one. That's, Cal Newport calls that context switching. So you're constantly, changing your attention, and you're not giving your attention, which is a skill or a tool of the brain, a chance to really focus in on one thing. And by doing that so constantly, you're conditioning your attention, which means that as you go on throughout the rest of life, you have a real difficult time actually doing anything, because you've cultivated impulsive intention that can't actually stick on one thing. You can't sit down and read a book, you can't sit down and hold conversation with someone, and you can't even sit down and watch a TV program without checking your phone, and that is worrying. How can you ever get anywhere if you're just going to be so consumed and possessed by this device, which I am and have been and continue to be. It's a very, very powerful piece of technology.
You're a bit more mindful now of the power of what it does. And like I mentioned there, like now when I catch, when I catch myself mindlessly scrolling, I stop it and I try and reprogram that, as opposed to just sitting there. And because I have personally found it's much harder for me to retain information, to engage with any form of resource or like traditional media now, read a book, watch something for more than 5 minutes without. I don't find that anymore, but I found myself slipping into that over the 4 or 5 years, and I was like, well, I wonder why that is. Like I'm not changing, but I was changing the way I was consuming, and it was mindless. There's a lot, and context switching, as you mentioned there, is very important.
Attention residual is another concept which is fascinating and kind of concerning. So you could be working on a project, and maybe it's studying, maybe it's something for work, and you could sit down and you'd spend 15 minutes and you finally get your attention into this place of focus, and you're in a flow state and you're working, and a half an hour goes by, and then you change your attention. You pick your phone up and you check your phone, and that is attention switching, so context switching, and then you try to return to the task at hand, But the idea of attention residual basically means that because you've switched your attention and returned to the original task, it takes a long time, longer than you might realize, for you to recalibrate and access that flow state, you know, and actually get the best out of yourself, which is conditioning ultimately. So that's a very negative impact of not sticking with one thing, and something that anybody out there who wants to try produce anything of substance, whatever that is, creatively, practically, work, that's something that, you know, should be, I think, considered, because we all fall prey to the attention switching and the control that the device has on us.
100%. The last thing I'm going to touch on today, I'll be candid about this. We are planning on having a conversation about this cryptocurrency kind of wave that's upon us at the moment. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you to come back on a second podcast and talk to me about that, because I think there's so much there. It'll end up being a monster episode.
Yeah, and financial freedom as well, you know.
Well, I want to touch on that now before we go.
Yeah, cool.
Just to integrate this in, because the danger sometimes when people hear this kind of conversation, and a lot of it's focused on habit and health and performance and all that kind of stuff, nutrition, wellness, breathing. I feel like some people think we are purposely avoiding the part of the conversation which is real life, which is people have responsibilities, and
big responsibilities, massive burdens, massive stress, massive conditions where, you know, people in their family are unhealthy, they're unwell, they're sick, maybe they're in some other extreme circumstances. Life is brutal. It's brutal, and some people's circumstances are much more brutal than others. So yes, it's harder for some people.
And even with the average person, the middle class person nowadays, who is well to do, has a good job, making decent money.
Oh, they're still managing.
Managing.
We carry our cross.
100%.
We all carry our cross. You know.
So, like, a huge part of the conversation that now I'm really learning about at the moment, and you're really helping me with this too, is this concept of financial freedom. And nowadays, people roll their eyes when they hear that, because everyone wants to be an entrepreneur and have a side hustle and be Gary V and have 10 projects on the go and have an e-commerce website and all this kind of stuff. But it's not about that. Finances and your position in life, with all of those things that you mentioned, such as sick family or basic needs like shelter and food and all that, it all comes down to money at the end of the day. And money's a difficult topic for many people, and it has been for me for a long time to talk about too.
The relationship of money is, for the most part, is poor. You know, it's a very we have a negative relationship towards something that is so important and such a massive part of all of our lives.
I think you said this to me, and Brian definitely said this to me, Brian O'Loughlin, this concept of money is energy.
It is.
Money is energy.
Absolutely. That's my relationship with it.
And that's your relationship with it. I'm starting to understand that myself as well.
Yeah, and it's, you know, it's very clear that even if we haven't got, like, you know, money as we know it in the form of paper and like euro, it's the human condition to exchange value. So this behavior exists, and it always has existed. We must exchange some form of value to cooperate. So in the tribal sense, you could say that, you know, I lent something to the other tribe, or within the tribe, someone gave me something in return for a favour, and this evolved into battering. That's the name.
Bartering.
Bartering.
Yeah. Battering.
Yeah, bartering everyone.
Give us the money, or I go.
Yeah, you're getting it.
Yeah. That is one form of exchange of finance. Is that right?
It is. So, like, it's who we are, and money, as we know, is just an expression of that.
Yeah.
But what money is, it's energy and it's fuel, and what it allows you to do is live life on your terms, and how you please. And if you can get yourself to a position of financial freedom, which I recognize as not being at the mercy of conditions that you don't want to be at the mercy of. So that could be working the job you're currently in. It could be doing the 9 to 5 that, you know, a lot of people complain about all the time, and you see that, if only I could win the lotto. Everyone talks about it. You know, that's, the odds are against you. You know, but there is other options.
There are controllable options.
There's controllable options now, and there's more now than there ever is. And this doesn't mean that you have to go and leave your job and you have to just, you know, I'm going to just hand it up. I've got too much responsibility. I've got, you know, family to look after. That's not it's not black and white like that. And what that can look like is you exploring and cultivating other avenues, other skills, and start thinking about generating other forms of income that you can build on and build up, and potentially get yourself to a place where you can reduce the hours in the job or the work that you don't actually enjoy doing, and potentially get yourself to a place where you don't actually do that at all. And you're in control of your own circumstances, your own money, and you can get yourself potentially to a place where, first of all, you're doing something that is yours. It's your creation, which I think is really important for most of us. And you're generating money from that, and you get to live on your terms. Is that not a beautiful, beautiful notion that I think most of us share a desire for?
And it is absolutely unavoidably linked to this ability to live your best life.
It's a part of it.
Hashtag live your best life. It's completely linked with it, because if you don't have some level of control over your circumstances, that is one area where you're at the complete whim of your boss or your job or your industry or the economy or whatever. Now, most people will be in some level at the mercy of that, but it doesn't give you a lot of freedom to explore your habits or your mindfulness or your self-exploration. So for me, it will be part of that normalization to understand this.
It probably touches on the normalization and the optimization part
as well. Yeah, definitely.
To understand and change your relationship with it, consider it.
Yeah, consider it, change your relationship with it, understand what it means to you, remove, and this is, I'm talking to myself here as well, remove the power it has over decisions that you make constantly.
Definitely.
As you very rightly pointed out, that's a process that takes time. It doesn't happen tomorrow. Quit your job and go live the lifestyle. And I know this message comes across, like, I like listening to Joe Rogan sometimes, and one of his big ones, if you don't like what you're doing, leave and do something else.
And that's not possible for everyone.
It's not. And fundamentally, I agree with it. But practically, there's steps. But you can still do it.
Definitely. And even if you're in a position that you don't want to leave your job,
your job might be fine.
That's fine. And if your job is fine, great, that's amazing. And if you just are, comfortable in your job, whatever, that's cool. But it's, what are you doing with your money? How in control of your financial situation are you? How financially educated are you? And I don't mean like you need to be some kind of financial advisor, but do you understand ways and options that you can use your money to actually benefit you more? Because at the moment, like, most of us put money in our bank, and the bank use that money in the background, and they make profit off that money, and they don't give us much back for it, and all while it's losing its value because of inflation. And what do we get for it? There's options now where, and like investors have known this for a long time, that you can put money into blue chip companies. A blue chip company is a company that has been around for a long time, and like Cadbury's would be a blue chip company, Coca-Cola. Yeah. And you can put money into this and get like between 5 and 8% a year back on your money. So you're actually getting paid for your investment, and then you're like building that up. And there's other options you can explore. And this is all you taking control and responsibility and being deliberate about how to improve your financial situation.
Well, once you understand that concept of money is energy, that makes a lot more sense, because if you're providing that energy to the bank or to Cadbury's or to Coca-Cola, you should have some return or benefit for providing that energy, because you procured that energy by giving another form of energy in form of your time and skill and education to procure that money. That's now your energy to use somewhere else. So you should, like, this concept of having money work for you, not just having it sit and doing nothing. That is what it is. If you've created or acquired that energy from committing part of yourself, that you should then be able to use that to benefit yourself in other ways.
Definitely.
And at the risk of going, because it's a lovely little teaser for the episode on finance and crypto and all that kind of stuff.
And I think I'll just drop a little something in the air.
Go on,
just to give people an idea of what's coming.
Okay.
Crypto is an immense innovative technology that's going to infect every aspect of society. But some of the applications that have been built and are in use and have many customers are decentralized banks, where very amazing minds, like brilliant people who have been around for a long time, have created platforms and ecosystems of this technology that actually serves the interest of the people who are using the platform. So they're not designed to funnel money into the board of directors at the top. They're actually created for the people. And you can go onto these platforms and you can put your money into them, and the platform automatically in the background will put your money to work. It will lend it out, and it will use the money in different ways, and it will actually pay you an interest on your money. And you get that every year, and that's pretty guaranteed, and you can get it insured so if anything happens to the platform. And there's a couple of platforms now that I'll just,
go for
suggest so people can check these out that are super legit, very credible, regulated, very well established. One of them is BlockFi. BlockFi just secured 300 million in crowd raising or fundraising from venture capitalists in a Series C round. So it's based in New Jersey, I believe, in the States. Celsius is another one. It's created by Alex. Can't remember his second name, but he's the inventor of voice over internet protocol, which is VoIP. Yeah. It's how we make calls over the internet for free. So he built this. And crypto.com is another one. And there are 3 platforms. Have a look, check them out. This is not just Bitcoin. It's not just
and
Bitcoin.
I'm going to give you, because you usually do this, I'm going to give you a little caveat. Darren is not telling you what to do with your money. This is just to start a conversation and understand what's happening, whether you do anything or don't do anything. It's a conversation we need to start to understand because the world has changed.
Yeah, of course. And I think I'm never going to tell anybody what to do with their money because that's your own choice. That's your choice. But what I am saying is we are in a society now where we have many more options for our money than just putting it into a bank that really, quite frankly, doesn't care about us. Doesn't actually care about us too much, I don't think. And there's many options now that you can explore. And what this technology is giving us is choice. And there's other avenues outside of this technology that give us choice. And this is the direction we're trending in. And this is growing exponentially. And it's unstoppable, and it's regulated and it's all in alliance with compliance and everything. So people have the option to get ahead of the curve and actually, put themselves in a pretty good position and take control over their financial future.
Beautiful. And again, just to show how much this lines up with everything we speak about, why it's so relevant is the big organizations and systems do not care about the individual parts. It's a fallacy to think that. And again, people kind of, it's not conspiracy.
It's built into the design of the framework.
Into the framework.
It's evident.
And why we care about that is empower yourself. You can live, I live within the system, you're a much better example than me. You live within the system. You engage with all these different amazing technologies. You take advantage of the fact that we've developed with technology, technologically advanced. We have access to things we didn't have 5 years ago. Take advantage of all that. Medicine is amazing. It's incredible. There's so many incredible things that you can take advantage of. It's not to say we should tear it down and go live in caves, but empower yourself and take control for yourself to live within that system, but by your own rules for the most part.
Of course.
That's what all this links into: health, money, spirituality,
everything.
Breathing.
It's all
whatever.
a part of it. It's all a part of it.
Empower yourself.
Yeah, and just to note, I had an awful relationship with money. I was never really taught the value of money growing up. Yeah. And it took me a long time. I used to live paycheck to paycheck, and it was just a poor relationship with money. And it was something that I put a lot of effort in to develop. And, I'm still developing, but just so to make aware that, this is also a skill that you can cultivate through understanding over behavioural change and insights around that topic. But yes, Danny, it absolutely all ties in. And whether you like it or not, your financial situation is a very potent foundational layer that gives rise to you actually realising and living a life on your terms and, growing and realising your full potential, if you will.
Beautiful.
So
put it on a t-shirt, man.
Yeah, and you mentioned we can do this podcast again about crypto. I'm happy to do it. I've been in the industry since 2014. I've worked for Coinbase, I've worked for Amazix, which is a consultancy firm, and I've done a lot of my own research. So very happy to have that discussion.
Beautiful, yeah, because I know I benefit massively from understanding what's happening, and lots of other people would as well, because there's a kind of a love-hate relationship now at the moment. Some people kind of roll their eyes when they hear of crypto. Some people are very not just crypto, blockchain technology and the way the world is changing. But if you agree to come back and talk to us about it, I'd be very
sure, happy to. And the reason people kind of turn away is because they don't understand
Lack of understanding.
They don't understand, and they refuse to try to understand it because it's so new and fresh and it's intimidating. And the exact same was true for the internet.
Yeah.
The behavior that many people are exhibiting now in their resistance to entertain and try to understand this technology is the exact same for the internet. When it came along, most of society belittled it, and many businesses said, I'm never going to use this. What's the point? Why would I even think about it? Same with electricity. When it came, everyone dismissed it. Why would I use this when I have candles in my house? what good is this going to do for me? Isn't that just hilarious now? Same with cars.
Why would I drive a car when I have a horse?
What, 40 million horses in America when cars came, and the infrastructure wasn't there was no gas stations, and people laughed at this is a novelty for the rich. Why would we ever use that? Hilarious. And that just clearly highlights that we have a condition in us where we are resistant to change, and we're resistant to new technologies, and we don't actually entertain them. And the same is true for blockchain, because blockchain technology is probably the most up there with being one of the most important inventions, but it's so young that we're yet to really realize its
true meaning.
It's true meaning, and also the impressions it's going to have.
Yeah.
Just like in 2000, we didn't really see the internet. There was a buzz around it, and everyone in the tech world was talking about it, and the world was talking about it, but didn't understand it. We're in that phase now, about 2000, similar with blockchain, where everyone who's in the scene gets it and sees the patterns, and it's a lot of buzz and it's a lot of excitement, but we're probably not going to realize or experience the full impact of it, or begin to experience it probably for another 5-10 years.
Yeah.
Much like we didn't actually have Facebook till like 2007, YouTube, similar time, and all these other websites. And if you think about YouTube back when it started, it was hilariously basic.
People are like, well, what is this?
Yeah.
But look at it now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there you are.
Mr. Darren Hendrick, off my God, Mike. It's always an absolute pleasure. My brain does be buzzing.
Yes,
but
likewise.
genuinely, I know we do this all the time informally, but I appreciate you coming on the show.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. What a way to kick off the next phase of the Prymal podcast. And people are going to be hearing the NEXOA name a lot more going forward. I'm going to drop all the links. I'm going to have to get you to send me everything that you mentioned into the show notes so people can access the books. You mentioned the resources and that kind of stuff. You are coming back to do number 2 on financial freedom and cryptocurrency and blockchain.
Yes, and I'm going to be launching my own podcast as well.
What? It's official.
Yeah,
it's official.
It's happening. So I've been...
Where are you launching that, by the way?
In this amazing studio called Prymal, and
Prymal Productions.
Prymal Productions, and Danny has created a fantastic environment here, beautiful, with the best, highest quality equipment, and it's just fantastic. And Danny has a business here where he allows or enables people to come on and start their own podcast, and he has a 3-month course where if you're interested you can come and he'll help you set up everything and get you sailing in the right direction. And inevitably we're going towards a society where anybody with something to say is going to have their own podcast. Businesses are going to have their own podcast, and we're going to laugh at the notion that people at one point said, who does he think he is? Who do they think they are?
Everyone can contribute value to the community.
We're all individuals. We all have unique opinions and perspectives, and people out there might find value in that. But you know what? That's not even important. If no one actually listens to this, it's not important.
No.
What's important is that we're sitting down and having a chat, and we're stimulating each other's minds, and we're growing and we're learning and we're developing. That's ultimately, I think, what's important. If, as a byproduct, people tap in and listen to this and find value, great. But for quite frankly, it doesn't mean a whole lot to me.
No one's going to believe I didn't pay you to say what you just said there. But I appreciate that. No, I really do appreciate that. And also, shout out to Fish, who's doing Young Jamie for the day.
Young Jamie, he's
Young Fish,
we're giving him a little trial. We're giving
trial run today. Nothing's gone on fire yet.
We're going to see how he gets on. We'll look back over everything and see can we find a spot for him in the empire.
100%. Look, Darren, always a pleasure.
Yes, Danny, likewise.
Really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for that.
And I absolutely love what you're doing. I have so much respect for you, and it's a privilege to call you a business partner and a friend, and I'm excited for what's ahead with your enterprise. Danny has a baby coming soon, so by the time you listen to this, he's going to be
it'll be here,
a daddy again. So congratulations with that, brother.
Thanks very much.
And exciting times ahead. I'm excited for what's ahead for both of us and for Ireland. And the world.
For everyone. Just before I let you go, if somebody wants to reach out to you to have a chat, conversation, pick your brain, can they? Number one, can they? Am I putting you out there for?
No. Listen, I'm more than happy for people to reach out to me. You can potentially reach out to me on Instagram, DH Productions, or you can send me an email. Ideally, and I say that because. With the recent kind of growing interest in crypto, it's been just exhausting. I've had a lot of messages, and I did say in Paddy's podcast, reach out to me, and I'm very happy for people reaching out with interest. But it's a lot. I've had like 30, 40 messages a day, and it's just been pretty intense, and I need to kind of set boundaries. So ideally, maybe Instagram or my email, dhendrick with a second K at gmail.com. So that's 2 Ks.
I'll drop that into the
cool.
show notes as well.
And I'm more than happy. Anybody can reach out to me about anything, and I'm happy to have a chat. I'm happy to, maybe meet up in person. I'm all for that. And I love people's natural curiosity and interest in growing and learning. So I'll always make time for that.
Beautiful, man.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
We'll see you on the next episode.
Beautiful.
Well, guys, we did it. We're back on the horse and we've another episode in the bag. Thank you so much for listening to this chat with myself and Darren the Dazzler Hendrick. I hope you found it useful or at the very least somewhat entertaining. If you think this podcast is class or decent, or even if you think it's a bit boring, why not get in touch and let me know? I love getting messages from all the listeners of the podcast, and it just helps me get a feel for whether you're feeling the feels or not. And if you've got 30 seconds, I'd really appreciate if you left a review on Apple Podcasts for me. It's so helpful when it comes to getting the show in front of other people who might be interested in listening. Thank you to Darren for another class conversation as always. And if anyone wants to find out more about anything that we discussed, you can check out the episode notes over on www.prymal.ie/Darren H. All of our contact details and links are in there. Seriously, starting with a quality guest like Darren, you might be thinking that there's going to be a few filler episodes and stuff in the coming weeks, but honestly, wait until you see the lineup. Thanks again for your time and attention. I'll see you in the next episode.